Let's start. And thank you for joining a workshop named Compressed AI 2055, that is named after compressed data structure for advanced intelligent data analysis. And this workshop aims to summarize our past achievements and mention future direction in your team. And my name is Yasuo Tabei at the Succinct Information Processing team in RIKEN AIP. So aim of this workshop is AIP Center has entered the fiscal year of its 10th year's project. And this year is a milestone of 10th year. And I served as a unit leader from 2017 to 2023, and I promoted to team director last year. And the goal of this workshop is to summarize and promote key team projects. And I would like to explore a new research topic on compressed data structure. That's why I organize this workshop and invite the various leading researchers in this field. And topics are a wide range of variety, and sketching technique from Professor Yamamoto and genome indexing data structure, Nishimoto Takaaki and Professor Langmead and Gagi, and data structure for genome assembly from Professor Puruichi and PVD, and the straight line program from E and similarity search by Professor Venturini. And the goal of this workshop is to foster collaboration, idea exchange among attendees. And I would be very happy if some new collaboration and research started in this workshop. And before going to detail of this of the research result in my team, I would like to introduce RIKEN AIP. RIKEN AIP founded Center for Advanced Intelligence Project in 2016 under Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology, and there are 137 employed researchers, 47% international and 23% female, and 270. We have 257 visiting researchers and 96 domestic students, and 179 international interns in total. So our main office is here, and we are in this floor, and our office is not only this office, but also our we have many offices from north to south, from south. And there are 3 research groups, and generic technology and goal-oriented technology and AI in society. And the generic technology group focus on fundamental research of machine learning and AI. And our team belong to this generic technology group. And the second is a goal-oriented technology, and they research on application of machine learning and AI. And a third group is AI in society. And so we have international collaboration partners and from all over the world. And now we have 36 MOU partners, and then the number of partners are growing. So as I mentioned, this year is the final year of AIP Center, and each team is holding progress report meeting to share the research achievement to society. The workshop is summarized this web page, and this is a list of workshop of they have been finished in this year. And our research now today is a workshop for our team, and there's a workshop for other team continue in this year. And the final AIP symposium is planned at the end of the fiscal year to summarize the center's overall achievements. So actually 4 members have belonged to our team, and Takaaki Nishimoto now started June 2017 and currently a research scientist at AIP, and he gives a talk as a next speaker, and his research is string processing for highly repetitive string. Second is Shunsuke Kanda from April 2018, and currently engineer at Sherpa. And Sherpa is a company for processing for raw documents. And he researched on compressed try and similarity search. Third is Daisuke Kimura from June to 2017, and currently a researcher at Retrieval, and he researched on feature map, so-kernel approximation. And Sankadip started from November 2018, and currently assistant professor at University of Tokyo, and he researched on compressed data structure for graphs. Most of members have left from this my team, but our team is growing as the new member will be joining us starting this July. And our research activities are based on compressed data structure as a core technology. That is a data structure that enables fast operations while keeping data in compressed format. We have a wide variety of research topics, and first is a compressed data structure for highly repetitive strings. Basic data structure, grammar compression, and run length BWT. And second is a similarity search for vectors, graphs, and trajectory. We research on data structure of succinct tries and wavelet trees. And third is machine learning on large-scale data. We research on grammar compression succinct try. Throughout this research, we have developed both theory and practice of compressed data structures. So I will summarize the first topic of our research, compressed data structure for highly repetitive strings. Background of research is the rapid growth of genome databases. Now, 100,000 Genome Project stores 70 terabytes in size, and there are huge genome databases. Yesterday, Professor Pibili dealt with the same problem, and he gave a tutorial talk on a compressed data structure for genome assembly. And as a basic technology, there is a Barrows-Wheeler transform. It's a reversal transformation string. And the key property is a one-to-one correspondence between BWT and sorted BWT. And each element in sorted BWT points to previous character in T. And the function is if we can reconstruct data efficiently, we can do a one-pass reconstruction of original data. And it enables fast search based on this property. Following BWT, we can develop the construction search algorithm for RLBWT with optimal time and space. And RLBWT is a run length encoded BWT, and its BWT is compressed into RLBWT by run length compression. Features it achieves high compression, highly repetitive strings. And the contribution is it introduces a space efficient bipartite. We introduce a space efficient bipartite graph representation. We named it LF interval graph to represent the correspondence between BWT and sorted BWT. And it's like this, there are one-to-one correspondence and BWT between BWT and sorted BWT. We represent this relationship by bipartite graph. And this representation is very efficient. It enables us to perform optimal time construction and search. And the construction, time and space complexity for construction is this. It's linear time to the text length, and memory is a BWT bounded space. And search time is optimal, and time is memory is this. Key experimental results are human chromosome 90 data from 1,000 individuals can be compressed. The original size is 60 gigabyte. It can be compressed to 250 megabyte. It takes 11 hours, and the space is approximately 2 gigabyte. So actually existing method failed to complete construction within 24 hours. That is the main result. The idea of behind bipartite graph representation of RLBWT is finding growing use in diverse applications. Now 66 total citations for two archival papers, and first the application is in genome search and toward practical implementation and extensions such as accelerations. So this is the result for genome compression on RLBWT, and in the next talk, Takaaki present a talk on details of this method. Second result is the similarity search, and the task is to retrieving all vectors in a database that are similar to a given query. That task is a given query Q, and it finds all data points such as similarity distance is less than epsilon for Q. And we support various distance measure and cosine and Jacquard min-max at all. Applications are many, and data deputation and data mining of trajectories and chemical compound screening, and recently retrieval augmented generations in LLM. So just this is a very important task, and we have developed a method for similarity search. And just our task is fast, and we developed the fast and space-efficient similarity search method of large databases. And the problem is vector databases are rapidly growing in high dimensionality and volume. So our approach is to use LSH-based hash to map input data to integer vectors. First, and this input vector data in various format is mapped to an integer vector by using LSH-based hashing method. And this method is LSH approximates the original distance between input data by Hamming distance in between mapped data. So, and then we index these vectors using compressed tries. And also we developed a fast search method on compressed try. Our contribution is to develop the compressed try structures enabling fast and memory efficient similarity search. The result is up to 60,000 times faster and 130 reduction of the memory usage compared to existing methods. And by From this result, we developed the open source similarity search toolkit. This is available from this URL. And this similarity search toolkit has been used in research and development settings at companies and research institutes. This toolkit has four remarkable features. First is it applicable to high-dimensional, large-scale data, and it enables fast and efficient similarity search. And it supports diverse data types, vectors, graphs, and trajectories. And also it compatible with multiple similarity measures like cosine, Jaccard, min-max. So that's it for our results for similarity search. And today, Professor Rossano Venturini talked about recent development similarity search. And our final topic is learning statistical models on compressed data matrices. And the key idea is to leverage the fact that storage cost for the data matrix is much higher than that for model parameters. Input for machine learning model is consists of data matrix and output vectors, and also weight matrix for data matrix. And actually, important fact is that most of the memory is consumed by storing data matrix. So once if we can compress the data matrix, we can learn model parameters space efficiently. That's why we develop a compressed data and the model parameters directly compressed data. It's expected to enhance computational efficiency. So following this idea, feature map for kernel approximation has been proposed. Feature map is a map d-dimensional vector x into large d-dimensional vector phi x using this takes order d, small d times and large d memory and time. And it can approximate kernel function by the inner product of compact vectors. And then the model has approximated the same functionality as nonlinear model. So this figure explains this idea. And the input data is mapped to compact vectors, and then run linear model on these compact vectors. And it can approximate nonlinear model by linear model, and it can enhance the scalability of kernel methods. So we developed space-efficient feature maps for string alignment kernels in 2099. And the background is feature map approximate kernels via random data mapping. It's a Gaussian graphs and kernels. And we developed the space-efficient feature maps for alignment kernels. And our approach is to combine two hash-based techniques. First is edit-sensitive parsing, ESP, and then we apply Laplacian kernel-based feature maps. First, our input is a set of strings, and then these strings are mapped to integer vector by edit-sensitive parsing. Edit-sensitive parsing are grammar compression, and vector including non-terminals can approximate the original distance of string or distance of edit distance of input string. And then this integer vector is hashed to Laplacian-based feature maps, and then we run a linear model. So actually, this linear model can approximate nonlinear kernel of using edit distance in these input string. So the problem is the traditional FM require order small d times and large D memory. D is the input dimension and large D is the output dimension. So our contribution is we propose the space efficient feature maps requiring only order D memory. Result is high classification accuracy with linear SVM trained on compact vectors. So that's it for third topic on machine learning on compressed data. And the final topic is future research direction in our group. And we have several research directions, and I will introduce one of them here. And the compressed data structure supporting dynamic updates, a data structure that supports insertions and deletions. It no need for full reconstruction upon data updates. Why now it is important? And it's a growing demand for real-time processing in the era of IoT and edge computing, where in this environment, data resources, computational resource is very limited, and privacy concerns is very important. So that's why there is a growing demand for this. And the difficulty is updating compressed data structure is compressed and making hard to maintain compact memory usage and ensure fast updates and queries. So if we can develop these compressed data structures and expected outcomes, we can enhance edge computing applications and improve performance and reduce storage cost for large-scale data processing. So we investigating existing research on dynamic compressed data structures, and research on dynamic data structure is still limited. There are 21 papers in total, and 3 of them have been validated experimentally. So the number of methods can be implemented is very little, and the query supported by compressed data structure is very also limited. That's a problem. So that's why we research on compressed data structures supporting dynamic updates. So here we can use restricted recompression as a core technology. It's a grammar compression using randomized algorithms. It runs in linear time with optimal space. And the key feature is it supports efficient insertions and deletions in log n time. Because if once the structure of trees once a character is deleted and the corresponding nodes are deleted, but what reconstructs a tree can be performed very easily. And so we support suffix array queries, and it fundamental operations for pattern search on lexicographically sorted suffixes of a string. So outcomes are developed a compressed data structure that supports insertion, deletion, suffix array queries in polylogistic time with delta optimal space. The second result is a dynamic string index in BWT-runs bounded space. The achievements are we developed a dynamic version of R index that support locate queries. And the problem is that R index consists of multiple sampled arrays that makes updates difficulty. So our idea is to split RLBWT into 2 arrays of characters and integers. So first, the input RLBWT is split character part and integer part, and then index these arrays using a dynamic wavelet tree and B tree. So by combining the queries on wavelet tree and B tree, we can support dynamic updates of R index, and it also supports locate queries. We can derive an upper bound of update time, and it depends on the average of values in LCP array and other queries like this. And this method can be implemented, and we also perform the experiments and use human chromosome 90 data from 1,000 individuals. And we confirmed the average value of LCP is significantly smaller in genome collections. And the result is our update time is 1,000 times is faster, but locate query is 40 times slower, and just 4 times. Memory is 4 times larger. That's a result for dynamic string indexing BWT-round bounded space. So I'll make a brief summary, and so we presented we researched on foundations application of compressed data structures, and we have 3 main research results. And I also mentioned the future research direction. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, I am Takaaki Nishimoto, a postdoc working in RIKEN AIP. This presentation is a joint work with Shunsuke Kanda and Yasuo Tabei. Here is the summary of this talk. The main topic of this talk is algorithms and compressed data structures based on a compressed data format known as RLBWT. In this talk, I talk about 2 papers presented at ICARP conference. The key element common to both papers is efficient bipartite graph representation called interval graph, which is also known as move structure. Here is the background of this presentation. Recently, there has been a rapid growth in the size of datasets for genome sequences. For example, 100,000 genomes projects stores 70 terabytes of genome sequences. So there is a need for processing such massive datasets in real time and memory consumption. Next, RLBWT is an efficient compressed format of string. RLBWT can achieve a high compression ratio. For example, 60 gigabyte human genomes can be reduced to 250 megabytes. Moreover, many compressed data structures based on RLBWT can support fast string operations. So RLBWT has the potential to process massive datasets in real time and memory. This talk focuses on basic string operations, count and locate queries. Count query returns the number of occurrences of a given pattern P in string T. In contrast, locate query returns all the starting positions of P in T, like the right figure. This presentation answers 2 questions. The first question is, can we support count and locate queries in optimal time using order R word compressed data structures? Here, R is the size of RLBWT. The second question is, can we construct RLBWT in optimal time and order R word compressed data structures? Here is our contributions. We present OptoBWT R-comp based on RLBWT. OptoBWT R is a compressed data structure supporting count and locate queries in optimal time and order R words. RComp is an online algorithm achieving optimal time construction of random BWT in order R bars. The two tables show our results and previous results. In this talk, I first focus on OptBWT-R. After that, I will focus on RComp. First, I will explain two previous approaches for count query. After that, I will show that OptBWT-R can support count query in optimal time. First of all, I will explain BWT. BWT is a permutation of a string T created by sorting all the circular shifts of T and taking the last column L of the resulting matrix. Here, circular shift is a rotation of T like center left table. The lower figures illustrate how to make BWT. The left string is T. The left table illustrates the circular shifts of T. The center table illustrates the circular shifts sorted in lexicographical order. The last characters in this table represents the BWT of T. So BWT is a permutation of input string T. Next, I will explain LF mapping. LF mapping is a one-to-one correspondence between the last column L and the first column F in the right table. For example, the green A occurs as the fourth character in the first column F. On the other hand, this green A occurs as the eighth character in the last column L. So the green A of F corresponds to the green A of T by LF mapping, like the right figure. Next, I will explain LF function. LFI returns the position J of Fj corresponding to Li. For example, LF8 returns 4 like the right figure. LF function plays an important role for answering count and get queries. Next, LF formula is a formula for computing LF function. This formula says that LFI is equal to the number of characters smaller than Li in L plus the rank of Li at position I in L. For example, the number of characters smaller than the green A in L is 1, because the dollar is smaller than A. Next, the rank of the green A in L is 3, because the green A is the third occurrence of A in L. So LF8 is equal to 1 plus 3. That is, LF8 is 4. LF formula means that LF function can be computed by processing BWT-L. Next, I will explain SA interval. SA interval SC of string S is the maximal interval on the sorted circular shift such that each circular shift has S as a prefix. The left figure illustrates the two SA interval of BA and ABA. The SA interval of BA is the interval from position 8 to position 11. Similarly, the SA interval of ABA is the interval from position 4 to position 6. Next, I will explain the relationship between the SA interval of S and the SA interval S prime T prime of CS. Here, he is a character. The SA interval of CS can be computed using this purple formula. Here, K is the first occurrence of character C on the SA interval SC in L. Conversely, L is the last occurrence of character C on the SA interval ST in L. In the left figure, character C is A, K is position 8, and L is position 10. These K and L are mapped to position 4 and position 6 by LF mapping, like the center figure. So this formula ensures that the SA interval ABA is interval from position 4 to position 6. This relationship flows from LF mapping, and LF mapping can be computed by processing BWT-L. So the SA interval CS can be computed by processing L. Finally, the length of the SA interval of pattern P is the answer to count query. This is because the SA interval represents the occurrences of P in input string T. Next, I will explain order n-word data structure for count query. Here, n is the length of T. This data structure consists of two components. The first component is a data structure supporting rank query on BWT-L. Here, this rank query returns the number of a given character key in the length I prefix of L. The second component is an array C of size sigma. Here, sigma is the alphabet size of T. The array C stores the number of characters smaller than each character key in BWT. These two components can be stored in order n words. This data structure supports count query by backward search algorithm. This backward search algorithm computes MSA intervals for the suffixes of pattern P like the right figure. Here, M is the length of pattern P. Each interval SJ/TJ is the SA interval of the length J suffix of P. For example, in the right figure, pattern P is ABA. So the interval S1T1 is the SA interval of the suffix A. The first SA interval S1T1 is computed using the array C like the left figure. Next, the SA interval of suffix PA is S2T2. This SA interval is computed using the SA interval S1T1 rank query on BWT and array C like this example. Similarly, the SA interval of suffix ABA is computed using the SA interval S2T2 like this example. Finally, the length of the last SA interval S3T3 is the answer to this count query like this example. This backward search runs in linear time with respect to the length of pattern. Next, I will explain learnless BWT. Learnless BWT is the learn length encoded BWT of T. The left figure illustrates an example of learnless BWT. In this example, this learnless BWT consists of 5 runs, B2, A, B3, A4, and dollar. In this presentation, learnless BWT is represented as two arrays LR and DR of size R. Here, R is the number of runs in BWT. LR stores the characters of runs. DR stores the starting positions of runs like the center figure. Learnless BWT has 3 properties. The first property is that the number of runs is enormously smaller than the length of T if T contains many common substrings. The second property is that LF function can be computed using this purple formula. This formula indicates that LF function can be computed using learnless BWT and the LF mapping on the first characters of runs. The right figure illustrates an example of this formula. In this example, I is 9. The 9th character of L is contained in the 4th run. This run starts at position 7, and its first character is mapped to position 3 by LF mapping. So this formula ensures that LF9 is LF7 plus 9 minus 7. LF7 is 3, so LF9 is 5, like the right figure. The third property is that the original string T can be recovered from learnless BWT. This is because the original string T can be computed using LF mapping. Next, I will explain an order R1 data structure for count query. This data structure consists of 4 components. The first component is a data structure supporting rank and select queries on string LR. Here, select query returns the ith occurrence of a given character C in LR. The second component is a data structure supporting predecessor queries on DR. Here, predecessor X returns the largest value smaller than X in DR. The third component is an array LFR of size R. Here, each LFRI stores the LF mapping of the first character of the ith run. The fourth component is the array C, which has already been explained. The total size of this data structure is order R was, where R is the number of runs in BWT. This data structure answers count query by simulating backward search using randomness BWT, like the right figure. Similar to the backward search, the first SA interval S1T1 is computed using the array C. The other SA interval Sj plus 1, Tj plus 1 is computed using the SA interval Sj, Tj, and character C m minus j. Here, C m minus j is the m minus j character of pattern P. I will explain how to compute SA interval Sj plus Tj plus 1 using the SA interval Sj, Tj, and character C minus j. The position Sj plus 1 is computed in 4 steps. In the first steps, we compute the index P of the run contains the Sj's character by the predecessor of Sj plus 1 or dr, like the left figure. In this example, Sj is position 2, and this position is included in the first run of BWT. So index P is 1. In the second step, we compute the first occurrence K of C m minus j on the SA interval Sj, Tj in BWTL using this equation. The center left figure illustrates step 2. In this case, the blue B is the first occurrence of C m minus j on the SA interval. So K is position 2. In the third step, we compute the index U of the run containing the case character by the predecessor of K plus 1 on dr. The blue B is contained in the first run, so index U is 1. In the fourth step, we output LFRU plus K minus DRU as Sj plus 1, like the right figure. Similarly, position Tj plus 1 can be computed in a similar way. So the SA interval Sj plus 1, Tj plus 1 can be computed using Sj, Tj, and Cm minus j. Next, I will explain the bottleneck of this count query. The bottleneck is the identification of the run containing the Sj plus 1's character, like the left figure. Here, Sj plus 1 is equal to LFK, and K is the position in BWT computed by the backward search. This run is found by a predecessor query on dr, but the fastest predecessor query takes order log n time. So the backward search takes order m log n time in total. To reduce the running time, we present LF interval graph for finding the run result using predecessor query. The idea behind this graph is to represent LF mapping as a bipartite graph such that the run containing the Sj plus 1's character is found by traversing a path of a constant length, like the right figure. So this run can be found in constant time. Next, I will explain the LF interval graph. This graph consists of 2 sets of nodes and 2 types of edges. The first set of nodes is VF. Each node in VF represents a repetition of a character in the first column F, like the center left figure. Similarly, The second of those is the second set of nodes is VL. Each node in VL represents a repetition of a character in the last column L, like the center left figure. Next, EU is a set of undirected edges. These edges represent elf mapping between repetitions in nodes like the center right figure. EFL is a set of directed edges. Each edge in EFL indicates the starting position of a repetition in a VF is included within the interval of the repetition of a node in VL, like the right figure. For example, the first VF node starts at position 1, and position 1 in L is included by the first VL node. So the first VF node is connected to the first VL node by a green directed edge. Lastly, ELF is a set of directed edges. This set is defined similarly to EFL, like the right figure. This LF interval graph has two properties. The first property is that the number R prime of nodes is bounded by order R. Here, R is the number of runs in L. The second property is alpha heaviness. That is, each node is connected to order alpha directed edges. Here, alpha is constant. Next, I will explain three key properties of LF interval graph. The first property is that LF function can be computed using this purple formula. Here, I prime is the starting position of the repetition, including position I in L. J is the starting position of the repetition Y in F that is connected to X by undirected edge in EU. For example, in the left figure, I is 12, I prime is 9, and J is 4. So the first property ensures that LFI is 7. Next, the second property is that the VL nodes including two positions I and LFI in L are always connected by a path of length order alpha. This property follows from alpha heaviness. For example, in the right figure, the two yellow nodes are connected by the red path. The second property ensures that the length of this path is order alpha. In summary, we can compute LFI and the VL node including LFI in constant time by traversing a path starting out from the VL node including position I. Next, I will explain BWT-R for count query. This data structure consists of three components. The first component is LF interval graph. The second component is the data structure supporting rank and select queries on string L prime. Here, L prime consists of the first characters of the repetitions stored in VL nodes, like the left figure. The third component is array C prime of size sigma. This array stores the SA interval SD of each character C, and the VL nodes including the two positions S and T in BWT-L. The total size of BWT-R can be bounded by order R words. BWT-R supports count query by a modified backwards search. This algorithm computes M triplets like the backwards search. Here, each triplet consists of interval Sj, Tj, Xj, and Yj. Interval Sj, Tj is a SA interval of the length J suffix of P. Xj in the index of the VL node, including position Sj. Similarly, Yj is the index of the VL node, including position Tj. The modified backwards search computes the first triplet using the array heap prime like the center figure. The other triplet sj plus 1, tj plus 1, xj plus 1, yj plus 1 is computed using the previous triplets and the character cm minus j. Next, I will explain how to compute the j plus 1 triplets using the jth triplet and the character cm minus j. This algorithm computes sj plus 1 and xj plus 1 in 3 steps. In the first step, we compute the first occurrence k of cmj on sj plus 1, tj plus 1 in L. This position k is computed using the first equation. In the second step, we find the VL node U including position k in L. This node U is computed using the second equation. In the third step, we compute sj plus 1 and xj plus 1 by traversing a path starting at VL node U like the right figure. These 3 steps can be executed in constant time. Similarly, tj plus and yj plus 1 can be computed in a similar way. So each triplet can be computed in constant time. Finally, this modified backward search runs in order m time. Here, m is the length of P. I showed that BWT-R can support count query in optimal time. Next, I will explain 2 previous approaches for locket queries. After that, I will show that BWT-R can support locket query in optimal time. First, I will explain an order n-word data structure for locket query. This data structure consists of 2 components. The first component is a data structure of order n words supporting backward search. The second component is a suffix array. Here, the suffix array stores the starting positions of the sorted circular shifts of T like the center figure. These starting positions are called SA values for simplicity. The key property of the suffix array is the answer to locket query is stored as the SA values on the SA interval of P, like the center figure. So this data structure supports locket query in 2 steps. In the first step, we compute the SA interval of P by backward search. In the second step, we output the SA values on the SA interval like the center figure. This algorithm runs in order n plus OCC time. And the total size of this data structure is order n words. Here, m is the length of P and OCC is the number of occurrences of P in T. Next, I will explain a sample suffix array based on Langmead BWT. We store a sample suffix array using 2 arrays of size R. The first array SAS stores the SA values on the starting positions of runs in BWT. Similarly, the second array SAE stores the SA values on the ending positions of runs in BWT. The left figure illustrates these 2 arrays SAS and SAE. This sample suffix array has a key properties that this purple equation holds for each position I in SA. Here, SAEX is the predecessor of SA I plus 1 ESAE. This property follows from the relationship between elf mapping and Langmead BWT. The right figure illustrates an example of this key property. In this example, SAI is 11, and X is position 2. SAEX is 9. SASX plus 1 is 6. So SAI plus is equal to 11 plus 9 minus 6, that is 8. This key property indicates that the SA values on a given SA interval SD can be computed if we know the SA value SAS. This is because each SA value SAS plus J can be computed using SAS plus J minus 1, SAS, and SAE. Next, I will explain an order R word data structure for Rocket query. This data structure consists of 3 components. The first component is the data structure of order R words supporting backwards search. The second component is the data structure supporting predecessor queries on the sample success array SAE. The third component is the sample success array SAS. This data structure supports Rocket query in 3 steps. In the first step, we compute the SA interval SMTM of P by backwards search. In the second step, we compute the first SA value on the SA interval using a technique called two-hole lemma. But I omit explaining this step for simplicity. In the third step, we compute the other SA values on the SA interval using the first SA value and the inverse phi function. Here, this function returns SAI plus 1 for a given SA value SAI, like the right figure. This inverse phi function can be computed in order log n time using the key property of the sample success array. Finally, this algorithm takes order n plus OCC log n time. Next, I will explain the bottleneck of Rocket query. The bottleneck is the identification of the largest sample SA value X in SAE smaller than inverse phi I plus 1. This sample SA value is found by a predecessor query on SAE. But the fastest predecessor query needs order log n time. So Rocket query takes order log n time per occurrence of pattern. To reduce the learning time, we present inverse phi interval graph for finding this sample SA value X results using predecessor query. The idea behind inverse phi interval graph is to represent inverse phi mapping as a bipartite graph like F interval graph. Similar to LF interval graph, the sample SA value X is found by traversing a path of constant length like the right figure. So X can be found in constant time. Next, I will explain inverse phi interval graph. This graph consists of 2 sets of nodes and 2 types of edges. The first set is set of nodes SA sump. These nodes correspond to samples SA values in SAE, like the center left figure. The second set is a set of nodes inverse phi SA sump. These nodes correspond to the SA value mapped from the samples SA values in SAE. The third set is undirected edges E'(U). These undirected edges represent the inverse phi mapping from the sampled SA values in SAE, like the center right figure. The fourth set is directed edges ERL. This directed edge points to a node in SA sump such that its interval includes SAEI, like the right figure. Next, the inverse phi interval graph has 2 properties. The first property is that the number of nodes is bounded by order R. The second property is that every node satisfies alpha heaviness. So the inverse phi interval graph and LF interval graph have the same properties. Next, I will explain key properties of inverse phi interval graph. Similar to LF interval graph, inverse phi interval graph has the following two properties. The first property is that inverse phi function can be computed by this purple formula. The left figure illustrates an example of this formula. The second property is that the SA sump nodes, including I and inverse phi I, are always connected by a path of constant length, like the right figure. So we can compute inverse phi I and the SA sump node, including inverse phi I, in constant time by traversing a path starting at the SA sump node, including SA value I. Next, we explain BWT-R for rocket query. This data structure consists of three components. The first component is the data structure supporting the modified backward search. The second component is inverse phi interval graph. The third component is a data structure for the following second step, but I omit the details of this data structure for simplicity. These three components can be bounded by order R1s. BWT-R supports rocket query in three steps. In the first step, we compute the SA interval SMTM of pattern P by the modified backward search. In the second step, we compute the SA value SA SM and the SA sump node, including the SA value. This step is executed in order m time by modifying the two-hold lemma, but I omit the details of these steps. In the third step, we compute the other SA values on the SA interval using inverse phi function, like the right figure. Here, this inverse phi function is executed in constant time using inverse phi interval graph. So this rocket query takes order m plus OCC time, which is optimal time. I showed that BWT-R supports rocket query in optimal time. Next, I will talk about the optimal time construction of runs BWT. Here is the idea behind the optimal runs BWT construction. BWT can be constructed in an online manner by inserting less characters into BWT, like the left figure. Similarly, runs BWT can be constructed in a similar way. The bottleneck of runs BWT construction is the computation of n insertion positions into BWT. Previous approaches use order n accesses to a B3 for computing these insertion positions. As a result, runs BWT construction takes order n log R time. In contrast, we contract F interval graph instead of runs BWT. Because runs BWT can be recovered from nodes in set VL, like the center figure. The insertion position of new nodes into the graph can be computed by traversing a path of constant length in many cases, like the right figure. As a result, the number of accesses to B3 can be reduced to order R. Here, each access takes order log R time. Finally, LF interval graphs can be updated in order n plus R log R time in total. This running time is optimal time for most strings with the property R equal order n over log n. But I omit the details of this construction algorithm. Here is experimental results on a large data set. We compared our method with PP and faster PP. These are runs BWT construction algorithms in an online manner. The right table shows sigma, n, and r of benchmark datasets. The largest string is CHR19. This is 60 gigabyte string, and it consists of a collection of human genomes. The left figure illustrates execution time of each method. The right figure illustrates memory consumption of each method, but we did not measure memory consumption of programs not finished within 1 day. RComp processed the 60 gigabyte string within 1 day and 3 gigabyte working memory. In contrast, PP and faster PP were not finished within 24 hours. RComp was 5 times faster than faster PP in the best case. On the other hand, the memory consumption of RComp was 3 times larger than that of faster PP in the worst case. In summary, RComp achieved a better trade-off between time and memory consumption. Here is a summary of this talk. We have presented optimal time queries and constructions of runs BWT in BWT-runs bounded space. Key elements are LF interval graph and inverse phi interval graph. Previous approaches have 3 bottlenecks. The bottlenecks of count query is predecessor queries for computing LF function. The bottleneck of locket query is predecessor queries for computing inverse phi function. The bottleneck of runs BWT construction is order n accesses to a bit tree for computing the insertion positions into BWT. These bottlenecks can be removed using LF interval and inverse phi interval graph. Thank you.
Any question or comments?
Thanks, Takaaki, for the talk. Do you think, is this a sequential algorithm or parallel algorithm? Do you think you could use parallel processing to speed up RComp?
Parallel algorithm. I think this algorithm it is discussed the parallel this algorithm. This algorithm runs by a single processor.
Any other question and comment? Okay, let's thank the speaker again.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. This talk is in part how excited I am about the previous talk. So you have a good background for this talk. So I'll begin with some background information about why we in genomics care about indexing pangenomes. So some of you may know this already, but I think it's good background. Why do we want to index many, many human genome sequences? Why don't we just index one human genome sequence? And then I'll talk a little bit about progress that was made prior to the move structure work that we just heard about. And then I'll talk about our discovery of the move structure, our realization that the move structure was going to be very useful for us, and then some implementation details to make it sort of fast and practical. And then some future work. Okay, so to begin, the human reference genome, which we've been using for years and years to analyze sequencing reads that come from humans, is of course very long. It is 3 billion letters long. There used to be in London this exhibit where you could see a printed out version of the human reference genome. And as you can see, it's printed across many, many volumes, right? Because it's such an incredibly long string. So in some sense, it seems like indexing many genomes would be intimidating. Just one seems like plenty. But since the human genome was originally released, there have been many, many projects that have surveyed humans from across the world to see what genetic variation is out there. right? Obviously, people are different, right? Our genomes are different. And these surveys are identifying for, on the order of tens of millions of sites in the human genome that vary from person to person. And so one such project is the 1,000 Genomes Project, which is where this diagram comes from. But more recently, there have been efforts like the HPRC, which is the Human Pangenome Reference Consortium, and the HGSVC. I won't try to remember what that stands for, but both of them use long reads in order to really study human genomes and really get perfect assemblies, or as perfect as possible as we can get for human genomes. And so with all this new genetic variation information, it seems in some sense silly or a shame to continue to just use a single linear reference genome. But more concretely than that, there's also serious mistakes that we make when we use only one human genome sequence to do our analysis. So more than 15 years ago now was one of the first papers that pointed this out. And it was this particular paper was trying to use sequencing data to study what's called allele-specific expression. So they have sequencing reads that come from messenger RNAs. They want to align them back to the reference genome. And then furthermore, they want to be able to see whether one allele or the other, the one from the maternal copy or the one from the paternal copy, is more highly expressed. And what they found was there was a terrible systematic bias, which came from the fact that they only had one linear reference sequence. So if the allele, if the maternal or the paternal allele has more non-reference bases, so bases that don't match the reference genome, then that interferes with the read aligner's ability to find those read alignments, and it also therefore attenuates this measurement. So it makes it seem like there's less expression from whichever allele has more non-reference bases. And so it's perfectly confounded with what you're trying to study. If you want to study allele-specific expression, the fact that you're using a single reference actually creates this systematic bias that makes it very hard to study. And that's not just true for that one kind of analysis. It's also more generally true in regions of the genome that have hypervariability. So there's some regions of the human genome, especially regions that have to do with immunity, where for good biological reasons, there's a lot of variation from person to person, like very dense variation from person to person, which means whoever we pick to be our single linear reference genome, your genome doesn't actually look very much like that genome in this region, or at least not close enough to get good alignments. Right? So this sort of peaky trophy pattern that you see in this picture here comes from the fact that there's sections that we just can't align reads to because the reference is too different. And it comes up in many other situations too. I show this one to scare bioinformaticians because this is another kind of analysis called bisulfite sequencing. This is trying to assess whether some individuals are more highly methylated in some areas of their genome. Both of the sort of pictures here are showing an effect. In one case, one mouse, these are mice, one of the mouse strains is more highly methylated than the other. On the other side, it's flipped. The other mouse strain is more highly methylated than the other. The truth is, there's actually no difference between the two strains, but because of your choice of reference genome, whether your reference genome matches one of the strains or the other, you get this phantom effect, and if you switch the reference genome, it switches the direction of the effect. So that's very, to bioinformaticians, this slide gives them nightmares. Okay, so the goal of this work, of all this work where we're indexing pangenomes, is to avoid every kind of systematic bias that I just showed, and avoiding those is going to lead us to a world where when we design sequencing-based diagnostics and therapeutics, right, there are currently multiple approved sequencing-based diagnostics that are used in clinical practice. Sometimes you're sequencing tumors, for example, to study cancer. We can't let those be differentially effective depending on whether the person you're studying is or is not similar to the reference genome, right? So we don't want approved diagnostics and therapeutics that work differently for different populations of people. We need them all. We need them to work well for all populations. So all of the pangenome indexing approaches that we're talking about are in some sense sort of pushing us closer to this world where we don't have to worry about this systematic bias. And so many efforts have already happened to try to create efficient indexes of pangenomes. And there are enough of these that they're starting to sort of fall into different categories, sort of different flavors. So some of them have more to do with indexing collections of strings. So if you think of, maybe we've sequenced many individuals, many humans, and we'd like our pangenome to consist of all of their genomes, right? All of those strings. That's one type. And then another type is to, instead of just indexing the individual sequences, first try to relate the sequences to each other and sort of collapse them down into a graph shape. And then you're indexing the graph shape. But the graph shape has a kind of mapping back to the original sequences as well. And both of these are now very possible to do thanks to consortia like the Human Pangenome Reference Consortium, because they're sequencing so many human genomes. And so the strategy on top, the one where our pangenome is a set of linear references, happens to be my personal preference, and I can explain why. But everything that I talk about today has to do with that. However, it won't be completely unrelated to the idea of graphs, and I'll come back to graphs sort of toward the end. Okay, so what do we want to be able to do with these pangenome indexes? Well, there's sort of different gradations of how complicated the queries we want to be able to do are, depending on our goal. So the easiest kind of queries, the ones that we're usually immediately able to do once an index has been invented, are things like the count and locate queries from the previous talk. In other words, substring matching queries. So that's sort of one level of ambition. Another level would be to solve classification problems. So this might involve substring matching, but it might also involve more sophisticated queries, like queries to find matching statistics or the related idea of pseudo-matching lengths. And then an even more sophisticated kind of approach we might need to do is we need to do several queries that allow us to find seeds, that allow us to seed alignments that we then have to compute using, say, dynamic programming or something like that. So that's like the whole sort of suite of, now you have a read alignment, a read aligner. And there's been progress in all of these categories. Most of what I'll talk about today is the middle one, to do with classification, but there's a little bit that I can also report about read alignment. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about work that happened before we started using the move structure. Okay, so back to the Burrows-Wheeler transform. So this is another picture of the Burrows-Wheeler transform, but this is the one I show to try to explain why we might want to use Burrows-Wheeler transform-based methods for indexing pangenomes. So here's a pangenome. Okay, not really, it's just 3 copies of Row, Row, Row Your Boat. But what you can see is that once it goes through the Burrows-Wheeler transform, we have a number of runs, right? If we use run length compression, we have a number of runs that's relatively small compared to the number of characters in the original. I think in this example, there's 64 letters up there and 15 runs. And so if you take the number of letters divided by the number of runs, that's roughly speaking a compression ratio. And in this example, the compression ratio is 4.27. Notice that it's better than 3. So even though there's 3 copies of my genome of Row, Row, Row Your Boat, the compression ratio is better than 3, and that's because there's repetition within the copies of Row, Row, Row Your Boat. So we're getting the benefit of both across sequence compression and within sequence compression, which is generally speaking what we have when we're indexing human genomes. The run length compression for a single human genome is 1.8. So you already get some compression benefit, even if you're just indexing one genome. So this is the power of the, this kind of statistic is why we potentially want to use the Burrows-Wheeler transform for human genomes. It's not just true for human, though. So we've worked with many pangenomes, and so we've been able to compute this compression ratio for many different pangenomes. Humans at the top. I'll have more to say about human, but the more important ones are those 4 on the bottom. These are published pangenomes for yeast, maize, which is corn, Arabidopsis, which is a plant, and potato. And for those pangenomes, you can see the compression ratios are very substantial. You do have to compare, it's important to compare the N over R number to the number of actual genomes that are being indexed, which is that first column, number of haps or number of strains, haps for haplotypes. But at any rate, the compression ratios are quite good for all these different species. For human, we have a result in the paper that I'm mostly going to discuss today that shows that the scaling of how R grows compared to how the number of genomes grows is excellent, right? So if you take the human haplotypes from the Human Reference Genome Consortium version 1, which had 94 human haplotypes, so you can think of that leftmost column as being N, the number of letters in our input. You have to multiply it by 3 billion, but that's roughly speaking N. And then the last column is R, the number of runs in the Burrows-Wheeler transform. And as we go from 1 to 94, R only goes from 3.3 to 4.2. I can now update this result because there's a new version of the HPRC version 2, where they've assembled now 466 haplotypes. So I've updated the first column, updated the second column, which is just basically how big is the file that lists out all the genome sequences, and then I've also updated the last column. So as the number of haplotypes increases by a factor of 466, R increases by a factor of something like 1.6, right? So this is, and I have a sort of graph representation of what's happening down there. So it's this sublinear growth in R, or this at least drastically slower growth in R compared to N, that makes us very motivated to pursue all these different ideas in compressed indexing. So there was a progression of projects that I started to become involved in. This isn't really a complete picture because the work on compressed genomes goes back much farther than this, and there's advances back, shortly after the FM index, for example. But I sort of got on board, roughly speaking, when the R-index paper came out. R-index and toe-hold lemma were mentioned in the previous talk. But anyway, this progression of papers is sort of how I started to get involved in the R-index work. And R-index was a way to build a compressed index where the size of the index grew with R and not with N, or at least not directly with N, but with R. And among the first things that we started to apply this index to, initially the papers were just establishing, yes, we can do this, and it's practical, and it's more practical than tools that do not use the big O of R style compression. And then we started to expand on the initial set of queries that were available with R-index, expanding to things called matching statistics queries, expanding to things called pseudo-matching linked queries, making more and more powerful tools for solving the classification problem. And so we have a sequence of papers where we sort of expanded how we use the R-index. Sometimes we're using the R-index to identify which class a sequencing read belongs to. Sometimes it's binary classification, sometimes it's multi-class classification, and sometimes it's taxonomic classification. In other words, we're trying to figure out which node of a taxonomic hierarchy a read originated from. So we made progress. The sort of corner of this plot, I'm intentionally making the arrows not go all the way into the upper right-hand corner, because what frustrated us with this work is we couldn't really reach the same combination of efficiency and accuracy that were available through approaches that already existed and that just did alignment. So this was a kind of sticking point where our work didn't quite make it to where we wanted it to go. So I'll come back to this later. And finally, to read alignment, we just, like weeks ago, we finally got this paper published. This is a team led by Christina Boucher and her students, Rahul and Eddie, where we constructed a tool called MoniAlign, which is an R-index-based read aligner. So it's actually doing the entire read alignment problem, the same problem solved by other tools like Bowtie and BWA, but it's doing it with respect to the pangenome and pangenome is indexed with a big O of R sized data structure. And it has accuracy comparable to other aligners, other pangenome aligners that already existed, like BG and Giraffe. There are some computational caveats to MONI-align, which are there in the paper. So it's not perfect at the moment, but it's working its way toward being highly competitive on both efficiency and accuracy to these existing graph-based tools. So this was some progress that we made purely using R-index. But now I want to talk about move structure, which was just introduced by the previous speakers. And we certainly didn't know about it immediately, right? So I don't follow the papers in iCalp necessarily, right? It's outside my area, but we were alerted to this to this paper by our collaborator Travis Gagey. He said, this looks interesting, like this might actually be faster, right? And with the most appealing part being the combination of bounds that were achieved, right? The sort of constant time iteration of the query along with the overall big O of R words of space. And so in one of our joint lab meetings, I have meetings with my group and Travis Gagey's group and Christina Boucher's group. And in one of our joint lab meetings, Travis and his student Nate Brown presented some work that they did where they implemented the move structure themselves. And they wrote a short paper about this called RLBWT tricks. And they talked about their index and their implementation and what it was capable of. And one of the things that Nate showed us was the inner loop. And the inner loop was, to my eye, insanely simple, just so much simpler than I could have imagined, right? Like, I'll contrast this in a moment with just how complicated the R-index is in any iteration. But this loop, which really is just these lookups and this arithmetic, was just so simple. It was very surprising. And there's no tricks here, right? Like it's not like we're using operator overloading or anything. Like those really are just some lookups and some arithmetic. Further, Nate showed us some speed results. So his implementation is called R-index F, but it is the move structure, right? So they just called it R-index F for some reason, but it really is an implementation of the move structure. And we looked at this table, and in particular, we looked at that line down there, which was essentially telling us how much time does it take to do one iteration of the matching loop. So one iteration of the loop I just showed you, or of that loop right there. And in the case of their move structure implementation, it was on the order of 100 nanoseconds. Whereas for R-index, it was much greater, right? It was over a microsecond, right? So it took more time, about 17 times more time. And this was amazing to me because 100 nanoseconds is, roughly speaking, the time required for one cache miss to main memory, right? So if you're going to retrieve some memory and that memory is not already in the cache, which is a very common thing when the index is so big, right? Usually you're moving to a new arbitrary place in memory. If you haven't accessed that same thing recently, which is typical, then you have to wait for it to be retrieved from main memory. And that takes on the order of 100 to 200 nanoseconds. So we were seeing essentially one cache miss per loop iteration, which was very surprising. Right? I couldn't have imagined that there was a query for something as complex as a compressed pangenome index where the inner loop could be one cache miss. So if you want to contrast that with the R-index, this is the figure that I used to show, the R-index is very complicated. It's very complicated. It's spread across several different data structures, some wavelet trees, and then the wavelet trees in turn are made up of bit vectors, and then the bit vectors in turn require data structures for rank and select queries and things like that. So the reason why there's such a large gap between the inner loop of the move structure and the inner loop of the R-index is, I think, largely because this is not one cache miss per iteration. This is many, many cache misses per iteration. And so we're waiting for, I don't know how many, maybe a dozen cache misses to be serviced within a single iteration of the R index. Right, and I'm only trying to show count query examples here. Okay, so this was very hopeful. And so when we saw that, we said, we'd really like to implement this. We'd like to implement it for genomes, for pangenome indexes. So we started work adapting the move structure specifically so we could apply it to DNA and pangenomes. And we were particularly interested in the kinds of queries that we need for classification. So these are things like matching statistics and pseudo-matching lengths. And along the way, we had a few ideas for how to maybe even speed it up further, even further than that very surprising result that we already were impressed by. Okay, so now let me explain some of the improvements, or some of the ideas for improving it. So first of all, we took that same loop that Nate showed us, and we looked for the cache miss. Like, where's the cache miss? The cache miss is in here somewhere. And it's probably the very first time that we dereference LF runs at next interval so that we can retrieve the length. So if you think back to Takaaki's diagrams, there's jumps that go from one side to the other, and then there were jumps that went down, right? The jump from one side to the other is the one that's probably the cache miss. So the first time we do that dereference, that's probably the cache miss, and then subsequent times, those are fine, right? Those are really just moving sequentially through memory, not a big deal. The memory infrastructure is pretty good at making sure that memory is available without incurring a cache miss. So thinking like schematically, what does this algorithm actually look like as it proceeds? It's a bit like, okay, we're going to dereference our table at some new row. I'm drawing that in red. Then we're going to move along. So there's the arrow that went from side to side, and then there were the smaller arrows that went down. So the smaller arrows that go down, those are sort of in those blue boxes there. And then we're going to compute an entirely new row, which is going to be somewhere distant in the move structure. And therefore, the very next dereference is again going to be one of the slow ones, one of the cache miss ones. And there may be a number, as Takaaki explained, there may be more than one of those blue movements, one of those shorter movements, sequential movements. And if you implement the move structure exactly as described in the paper, the number of blue movements is bounded by a constant because of that alpha heaviness restriction. Okay, but even so, the real time is the red things, right? So the red accesses are the ones that really take a lot of time because they're probably going to be a cache miss every time. So you should think of the red as being sort of like way more important. So as time goes along, you're spending much more time just waiting for the red access than you are doing anything else. Okay, so our first idea was to try to do what's called latency hiding, right? So if we know we have to wait, maybe there's other things we could be doing while we wait so that we don't waste quite as much time. And the usual way to do this is with memory prefetching. So this is a facility that every modern processor has where you can request that some memory be retrieved, but asynchronously. So you request that the memory be retrieved, and then you can go on with some work that might be whatever other work you have to do while you're waiting for the memory to be retrieved. So in this example, that might mean that from the end of the red box, if we issue our prefetch instruction here, but we still have some work to do in this blue box, then we can asynchronously prefetch, do our work, and we still have to wait, but maybe not quite as long, right? Because we got the memory infrastructure working on our request a little early. And so it's able to give us our result back maybe a little bit earlier. And so that would hide a little bit of the latency of that long request. And in this example, it looks like, okay, we achieved some speed up, but it doesn't look very impressive, right? So to really get a lot of speed up, we have to have not just one query going at a time, but multiple queries going at a time. Because that way we have a lot of work to do in the meantime while we're waiting for a request, because we can simply prefetch and then move to another query. So if we're working on, say, 3 queries at a time, we can advance We can advance the process for query 1, issue our prefetch, and then switch to query 2 till we get to that same point, issue our prefetch, go to query 3, and then we go back to query 1. And by the time we're back to query 1, probably our memory came in, right? So probably we hid all the latency, or most of the latency at least, associated with that distant movement through the table. So those two ideas together were one of our sort of optimizations for the move structure. And if you put those together and you just, in this diagram, in this plot, the horizontal axis is how many queries we have going at the same time. So it's like the horizontal part of the previous diagram, how many queries. And then the vertical is how much time is required for a bunch of queries. And by the time we get to 8 to 16 simultaneous queries that we're processing, the prefetching really achieves its full benefit. Yeah, question? It's one thread. Yeah, yeah. If you wanted to achieve something like this, but the thing you have to wait for involves going into the kernel, you know, like maybe you're waiting on something coming in from a solid state disk or something like that, then you could achieve something similar just by having many threads. But in this case, the threads wouldn't quite solve it because when you're waiting on a cache miss, there's no mechanism for you to be interrupted to switch to another thread. You're just stalled, right? It just stalls the processor. So by the time we get to 8 to 16 simultaneous queries, we get the full benefit, and the full benefit is actually pretty good. It improved the speed by more than twofold, for example, in this example. So that was the first idea. So what was the second idea? To cheat, and specifically what I mean by that is we sort of didn't implement all the requirements from the paper. In particular, we didn't do the splitting. So in Takaaki's examples, you could see that sometimes there was a run where that run, instead of being one row of the move table, was turned into multiple rows. In other words, it was split. And there's a certain amount of splitting that you need to do in order to achieve the constant time bound on the number of steps. We didn't do that, right? So we decided that, or after some profiling, we decided that we would just not do that splitting and hope for good average case. And the average case is usually very good. So this is probably worth it, although there are other reasons to do splitting, as I'll talk about later. And then for another aspect of what we were doing, which was threshold-guided repositioning, so the repositioning based on the thresholds, I'll talk about thresholds a little bit later. We also didn't really do that the way that we would have needed to in order to get constant time repositioning. So instead, we did a scan, a linear scan, and again, we just hoped for a good average case, which we generally did observe. So those were sort of the two ideas that were behind our first implementation. And so here's the rough results from the first implementation was just that if we compared our move structure-based classifier to an existing R-index-based classifier, which is this thing called Spumoni that we're comparing against here, we found that the move structure-based one was faster, and not just a little bit faster, right? It was 30 times faster. So something like a factor of 15 is coming just from the move structure, and then that additional factor of 2 is coming from the prefetching. So those two ideas together are both contributing to the 30x. However, it's bigger, right? And this was expected. I think it was pretty clear that because of the way the move structure relays out the whole data structure, you're not getting to do the large amount of columnar compression that the R-index is usually doing. And so you don't, by a constant factor, you end up being bigger than the R-index. And in this case, what we observed was we're about 5 times bigger than the R-index-based structure. But that sure does seem like a good trade, right? 30-fold speed improvement for 5-fold space improvement, we were very happy with. But we weren't quite satisfied because we wanted to get the space down closer to the R-index. Basically, we wanted to know, was the move structure just a better substrate to be working on? Could we somehow get the move structure to give us a whole trade-off space that maybe would dominate the R-index, in which case maybe we should just use move structure as our substrate. Okay, so shrinking the move structure. So we had a few ideas for how to shrink the move structure. So again, as was described by Takaaki earlier, the constant time bound on the move structure LF steps, or all the steps, all the different kinds of steps he described, requires doing some splitting. So in other words, you don't just let one run in the BWT become one run of the move structure, but sometimes you have to take a run of the BWT and split it into sub-runs so that you get multiple move table rows for that same run. But we don't have to do that splitting only for that reason. We can do splitting for any reason, right? We can do splitting for our own selfish reasons to try to make the overall index smaller. So for example, if some runs are long and we don't particularly want to allow that because we don't want to use that many bits, log of whatever that length is, if we don't want to use that many bits to represent an offset or to represent the length of a run, which are two things that we need to include in our move structure table, then we can use splitting to just make them shorter. Just make it so that they never exceed 2 to the 11, for example, so that we can use 11 bits to represent lengths and offsets. And I think this idea is used other places, including I noticed a recent paper that Simon was involved in. I was just rereading it on the plane and I realized, oh yeah, they do something similar there too. So this kind of splitting for length so that we can use fewer bits to represent offsets and lengths, this is one idea. But maybe the cooler idea is the kind of splitting that helps us store thresholds. So I'm going to spend a little time talking about thresholds. If this is like a representation down here of what the move structure looks like, so it's got columns and rows, and within each row we have to store several things. So we have to store, for example, what's the LF mapping of the run head, what's the length of the row, what's the ID of the destination of the LF mapping of the run head. That's kind of the first several columns. But if we want to be able to do matching statistics, then we need to be able to follow thresholds. So in other words, sometimes we need to be able to, when we have a mismatch, we need to be able to jump to the nearest run that represents the best way to extend a partial version of our match. And so that means we need to jump either up or down. And in order to know whether to jump up or down, we need to have a threshold stored. So if we really were storing all this in the move structure, that would actually require a fair amount of space because for every alphabet character, we need a separate threshold. Okay, so we looked into this. And first of all, let me just say what the thresholds actually do with this example, which I borrowed from the Moni paper. So these thresholds are useful in particular for matching statistics. So they're not needed for backward search. They're really just needed for if you want to be able to do matching statistics and mem finding. And so let's say that we've done typical LF steps in order to match part of our query. So our query there is TA, TTAG. And we've done right to left, we've used LF steps to match A, TTAG. And now we would like to extend that by one more. But in this particular case, we can't, because in the final column of that row, there's a G. And so that does not match the T that we would like to match. So if we would like to continue, like for example, okay, we can't extend this match, but let's extend the next best match. So in other words, let's give up on matching the whole query, but let's figure out what's the earliest point, and sort of the earliest offset from the right, where that suffix of what we've matched so far is extendable to the left. This is what computation of matching statistics involves, is it just repeats between LF steps and these so-called repositioning steps. Okay, so in this case, if what I mismatched on was a T, then I would like to jump either up to the next run up that is a run of T's, or down to the next run down that is a run of T's. If I jump up, I want to jump to the tail of the run, and if I jump down, I want to jump to the head of the run. But I need to know which one to pick. I need to know which one corresponds to the best way of extending a match. I want to extend the longest match possible. And to figure that out, you have to look at LCPs. So you have to figure out from the run you started in to the run you might jump to, what's the minimum LCP in that interval. And in this example, to jump up, the minimum LCP would be 1 because they all start with A, And then to jump down, the minimum LCP would be 0 because there's actually no common prefix, no globally common prefix. So in this example, you would want to jump up. Up is better because you're extending a longer match if you jump up. So the thresholds tell you whether to jump up or down. And that's what the thresholds are all about. So for example, in this interval of the matrix, if we mismatch on a T, just like I showed in my example, depending on which row we're in, we might want to jump up or down. So for example, if we're in any of those rows, we should jump up because the minimum LCP is higher if we jump up. If we're in any of those rows, we should jump down because the minimum LCP is higher if we jump down. And then there's some rows where it actually doesn't matter because there's a tie, right? The minimum LCP is the same whether we jump up or down. Okay? So if I wanted to put one threshold, if I wanted to put my finger on one place on this diagram where everything above here we may as well jump up and everything below here we may as well jump down, I could put it in any of those positions, right? Any of those would be fine. Okay? Because again, it doesn't really matter which direction you jump for those in between purple rows. So any of those thresholds would be equally good. And what you'll notice is that if we wanted to store these thresholds in the move structure, right, like let's say we want to store in every row of the move structure every threshold for every possible letter. We actually only need to do it for all the letters that don't match the letter of our run. Sometimes that information will be pretty simple. So like, for example, for this run of G's in the last column, the threshold would just be like right at the bottom. It would be sort of like right off the bottom. It would say, oh yeah, just always jump up. And then for that run down there, that run of A is similar, except you would just always jump down. And then for all those runs in the middle, it kind of, it actually doesn't matter where you put the threshold. So if we wanted to, we could put it between two runs. If we put it between two runs, then that would mean that every run is trivial in the sense that it doesn't matter where you are in the run. You either always jump up or you will always jump down. Okay, so our first observation here was that in practice, a lot of the thresholds are trivial in the sense that they really just need to be a flag that says whether you should jump up or down. It doesn't really have to be an offset because you always jump up or you always jump down. So we're going to call these trivial thresholds. So if we have lots of trivial thresholds, you can imagine we can save space because we'd like to store something like 1 bit to represent a trivial threshold. But sometimes the thresholds will be non-trivial and we can't get away with that. So our second observation is that we can use splitting to force them to be trivial. And actually this ends up being a big benefit. So in this example, this is from a paper in progress, and this is Mosen's example, so thank you to Mosen for making this for me. This is a move structure where those last 3 columns represent the 3 thresholds. It's a 4-letter alphabet, so we only ever need 3 thresholds per run, because again, you don't need a threshold for the letter that is the one that labels the run. And most of them are trivial in the sense that they're either 0 or they're equal to the length of the run, right? Either way, that's telling you if it's 0, that means always go down, and if it's equal to the length of the run, that means it always go up. So those are highlighted green. Only a few of them are non-trivial. And so we can just split to make them trivial. So we could split that run that contains the non-trivial threshold, pick the split point to be right where the threshold is, so that now that threshold is trivial, right? Because everywhere above where we split, it's going to say always up, and everywhere below where we split, it's going to say always down. So in this particular example, 2 splits are sufficient to force all the thresholds to be trivial. And if we can guarantee that all the thresholds are trivial, then the width of a row of our move structure is reduced because we only need 1 bit per threshold. So with these tricks that I just showed, we've been able to reduce the width of 1 run of the move structure that we're actually storing. So the first 2 rows up there are kind of our best ideas before we started fully splitting in the ways that I described. And so at the time that the Movie 1 paper appeared, I think it was pretty typical that our rows were 16 bytes wide. So that number there is the number of bytes per row. We had a kind of halfway threshold splitting idea that got it down to 12. But then when we started doing both length and threshold splitting, we were able to get it down to 8 bytes per row. And with a couple of other ideas, we can get it down even lower. Those ideas are sort of departing, though, from the spirit of the move structure, or at least the spirit that we enjoyed about the move structure, which is that it's all just one big table. So these ideas involve creating auxiliary structures, again, sort of moving one step back to the R index and adding a couple of auxiliary structures in order to save space. And so with those improvements, we can sort of plot the new trade-off space. So if you imagine, we can pick any of those row widths from the previous slide, and those row widths sort of carve out a line in this speed versus peak memory footprint trade-off space. And so all the sort of purple or blue dots are movie 2, which is movie with all the improvements that I've described today. The red dot is the best R-index-based approach that's comparable, which is called Spumoni. And then the green dot is the previous version of movie. And you want to be in the lower right, right? The lower right corner is fast and low memory footprint. And so the green dot is dominated always by at least 2 of the movie 2 dots, and then also the red dot is also dominated by either 1 or 2 of the movie 2 dots. So with all those ideas, we've created exactly the trade-off space that we wanted to, right? We have the ability to pick a point on the speed versus memory footprint trade-off space. Those points manage to dominate both our previous work using the move structure and all of the R-index work. So we think the answer is yes, the move structure is the right substrate moving forward. Okay, there's a couple things we don't like about our ideas so far. So one of them is if we sort of drive these ideas all the way to the biggest data sets available, so like HPRC version 2, for example, the amount of splitting that we have to do in order to achieve the all trivial thresholds result, for example, starts to get a little excessive, right? So it's always a trade, right? In order to make the rows, in order to use fewer bytes per row, you need to do more splitting. That makes the table taller, right? So we're sort of in the process of trying to make the table skinnier, we're also making it taller. And for HPRC version 2, we actually made it substantially taller than it was to begin with, such that we're not quite sure. We may have got to the point where the trade isn't worth it anymore. However, I think we can be more clever. So one aspect of the thresholds, which I briefly mentioned, is that sometimes you have freedom in terms of where you can put it, right? You may have many choices. And so if you're deciding where to put the thresholds in a way independently per alphabet letter, you might put thresholds in different places for different letters when they actually could have been in the same place for the different letters. So it could be that if you consider all the symbols at once, you can line up the thresholds in such a way that the threshold splitting splits less, right? Because one split will accomplish the same thing, but for more than one alphabet letter instead of just one alphabet letter. So I'm not sure. It's possible that number, 42% number, is something that we can improve on. We're still looking at it. Okay, and so with that, I want to sort of wrap up. And so I want to talk partly about what the move structure is actually currently being used for, and then what might be some future directions. So this is exciting. I want to point this out. So I talked at UCSD, so University of California, San Diego, in fall 2023. And I mostly talked about R-index stuff, but I had one slide on movie, which I think was a preprint at that time. And one of the students who was at that presentation said, oh, good, it's fast. We could maybe use it in our workflows for a particular classification problem called host filtration. So there's a lot of projects where you're doing what's called metagenomic sequencing. So you're sequencing everything that's in a sample. And sometimes it's contaminated with human DNA, right? Which may have creeped in because the sample came from a human, or it may have creeped in because of contamination in the laboratory. And either way, you want to get rid of that sequence. You're not interested in the human sequence. And they were not satisfied with using a single reference for this, as that was correct. They shouldn't have been satisfied with that. And so they were looking at pangenome approaches, and they used movie. And so there's a paper where they show that they are combining both Minimap2 and movie in different ways. Actually, method 3 is just movie, right? So method 3 is move structure only. But the other two methods are different mixes of the two. And they show that these approaches that combine the two have advantages compared to if you had only done Minimap to a single reference for sure, and then also there's also a time advantage to if you've done Minimap to several sequences in a pangenome. So I wanted to highlight this because I think it's a sign of a good idea when it makes this many hops in a small number of years, right? It came from RIKEN to Dalhousie, where Travis and Nate implemented their thing, and then it came to our group because we were impressed by Travis and Nate's results, and then it made its way to University of California, San Diego. Another way that we've used the move structure is to sort of push the boundary of the classification problem. So I showed before that we were able to improve over time our speed, our efficiency, but also our classification accuracy, but that we had not been able to really achieve the same as alignment-based approaches. So with the move structure as our substrate, we proposed an idea that we call chain statistics, whereby if we look at all the sequences in the pangenome and we find areas of conservation, which in sort of string algorithms terms, you can think of these as multi-mums, which is to say multi-maximal unique matches that are across all the sequences in the collection. If you find one of those and you just go to the move structure and find all the runs that are involved in one of those conserved vertical stripes that you see here, and just mark them as being in, I'm going to mark all the red ones as red, and I'm going to mark all the blue ones as blue. Then if you can check what color your match is in at any given point, then you can start to chain your matches in the sense that usually with matching statistics, you have no idea whether those matches are collinear with respect to any of the sequences in the collection. But if you can paint them this way, you do have an idea of whether they're collinear. And that is one way that we were finally able to still not quite reach, but get incredibly close to the accuracy of the alignment-based approaches, but far faster thanks to the move structure. Okay. So one thing I want to point out, because one of the things I'll mention as possible future work is there a way to kind of combine move structures with Wheeler graphs in some way so that we can have move structures for graphs? And in a sense, of course we can. And this work even could be considered an example of that, because as we are going to paint the runs that are, I briefly said that we paint all the runs that are involved in one of these vertical stripes. That's actually a little tricky because the vertical strips don't necessarily correspond perfectly to runs in the BWT, especially some of the ones that are farther to the right, right? Those things that we want to paint red are actually interleaved with other suffixes that we don't want to paint red. So some of the work that we're doing is actually, again, more splitting so that the run boundaries do tend to correspond to the color boundaries as well. Then that gives us an improvement when we go to color things. And in a way, what we're finding is something akin to tunnels. So something akin to Burroughs-Wheeler tunnels. And I have you may or may not have read the literature on BWT tunnels. This is the sort of early paper describing BWT tunnels. But these are one way to think of starting from the BWT and turning it into a graph representation. So you start with a string, you find tunnels, now what you have is a graph. Okay, and then, so this is just to say, yes, with the move structure, everything in red is driven by the move structure, and that sort of allowed us to get all the way to the point where we're competitive with alignment-based classification. So the move structure kind of is propelling us more quickly to progress. Okay, so I have a couple, this is the last slide. I'll conclude with a couple questions. So one question that we wonder is, in our past work for our index, we've been able to combine it with what's called minimizer digestion. So some people here are familiar with minimizers, but if you're not, just think of it as it's a context-dependent way of taking a long sequence and taking representative substrings out of it so that you can turn a long sequence into a short sequence in a lossy way, right? It's not compression, it's not lossless compression, it's more like lossy compression. And we showed previously that this actually combines decently well with the Burrows-Wheeler transform. In other words, the compression you get from Burrows-Wheeler transform is in addition to the compression that you would get from minimizer digestion. In other words, they don't interfere with each other. You can actually get a combined benefit from doing both. And we haven't tried this with movie in part because as soon as the alphabet gets larger, some of the things that we've done to sort of pack the move structure into as little space as possible won't work anymore, or at least it won't work as well. So you can imagine if we actually had 256 thresholds in every row, it would be hard to do the splitting necessary to make them all trivial. So that's a sort of ongoing question is there a way when the alphabet gets larger because we've turned the sequence into a sequence of minimizers and those minimizers are themselves the new alphabet. Maybe that's an instance where our index is going to work better for us than move structure unless we have some clever ideas for how to do it with move structure. And then my last question is just, is there a move structure for Wheeler graphs? So the work that I described might be kind of a starting point, but we're always interested in Wheeler graphs specifically for the case of the locate queries. So as Takaaki mentioned, right, move structure is perfectly capable of answering locate queries, but not very quickly. And in the case of the pangenome, the answer to the locate query, I'll send you all the thank you slide at the end. But in the case of the locate query, if what really happened is you found a match inside, for example, one of those vertical strips where it's conserved, then you're doing a locate query for basically a bunch of copies of the same sequence, but in different individuals, and that's not really useful. So in other words, just doing one of them would be sufficient, and then saying maybe there's a map somewhere that tells you that everybody else, here's the offset in everybody else, that you'll find the exact same match. But tunnels and collapsing and graphs are sort of doing that for you, right? So in other words, the collapsing of the graph is also collapsing the answer to the locate query. So that if the locate query is on the slow side, either because it's slow per locate or it's slow because you have to do several locates, the collapsing of the graph helps with that. So we are interested in seeing if there's some kind of way to combine move structure and Wheeler graphs. So with that, I now want to thank everybody who worked on this work. I can tell you who would be on that slide. It would especially be Nate Brown, Mohsen Zachary, Travis Gagey, Christina Boucher, and all the people involved in all the R-Index projects and our funders. Thank you.
Is there any question or comments?
So I have two questions. The first one is about what you were saying about minimizer digest. So is the problem just the alphabet size, or is there some other kind of?
I can't think of any other obstacle besides the alphabet size.
So how does it show up asymptotically in the move data structure?
Yeah, I don't know,
Okay.
is the short answer. So like when we did the work showing that the BWT and the minimizers could combine, we noticed that it does seem like that if you take the sparsity of the minimizers to be sparser and sparser and sparser, it approaches something, right? The combined compression ratio approaches something, but we don't know what. We don't know how to analyze that. I actually asked Dominic Kempa if he could analyze this. He's like, I don't know, that doesn't sound very interesting.
If he said no, then.
But I don't know what it's converging to, but I think that would be quite interesting.
Yeah.
You mean, sorry, so what's the sparsity that you can achieve with random minimizers, I mean with minimizers in general?
I think what I mean is there's the combined compression ratio of both the lossy and the lossless. And you might guess that they wouldn't combine well. So you might guess that once you do the lossy, you don't get as much benefit from the lossless. But that turns out not to be true. You do get a benefit from the lossless. And you might think, okay, well, all right, so you get a benefit, but maybe that's just because all the numbers are small. What if you take to the extreme the sparsest minimizer digestion scheme you can stand? Would that still benefit from lossless compression? And the answer seems to be yes, and it approaches some number, and we have no idea how to analyze what that number is.
Okay, just to confirm, so the hurdle in applying it immediately is that you've got implementations that work for a small alphabet, that assume a small alphabet, and
Yes.
they would need to be.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. And the second question involved a plot, which you can't put up now, but I noticed on the x-axis of one of the plots, I think you'll remember it, maybe everyone does too, but that it said number of long reads per second or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
So what exactly was the query being done?
Yeah, those were two different data sets because those were two different scenarios. One of them was human, one of them was bacteria. And we used a simulator to simulate nanopore-like long reads. And in one case, the read length was very different from the other case, which is why those two vertical axis scales were a bit different. But in both cases, we just, the vertical axis, we scaled it according to reads per second.
Okay, but the query you were doing was some substring matching.
Yes, well, it was, I think for that, we did PMLs. So we did pseudo matching lengths across the read.
I see.
So it's a bit like matching statistics, but without a second loop.
Yeah, I see. So you just you get to the end of one and then you go again.
Well,
Not quite.
you are following the exact same repositioning and LF steps as you would if you were computing matching statistics.
Mm-hmm.
But usually with MONI, you need a second pass to figure out the lengths of all the matching statistics. We forego that. We just let the lengths be approximate.
Okay.
So that's why we call them pseudo-matching lengths.
Cool.
So, but we are still doing every LF and repositioning step that MONI would do.
Thanks.
Thank you for the talk. It was very nice. First, I'd like to mention that I think there is a paper at the past SIA 2024 by Johannes Fischer and other people on compressing the move structure. I don't know exactly what they're doing since I haven't read the paper yet, but maybe you want to look into that.
I do.
The German people are great at optimizing things and at engineering their structures. So
and maybe I should mention the RLBWT tricks paper also had compression schemes. Mm-hmm. They were all kind of in the theme of because the compressibility comes as you look down the columns. Mm-hmm. We should do columnar compression. We should separate the columns and do compression.
Right.
Which wasn't the first thing we wanted to try because that kind of immediately throws out the locality of reference, right? So we wanted to start from trying to keep the rows intact and then make small steps back in the direction of some compression. But I don't know what that other work is about.
No,
it might be similar to what I described. Yeah.
Right. And then I quickly remember the preprint you have in preparation is called like K-mer lookups.
Yes.
But you didn't explain, why, what are the K-mers, right? Because, the move can allow you to, general substring search. Instead, the movie 2 will be optimized for K-mer.
Movie 2 will be able to do K-mer presence-absence queries and K-mer count queries as well, where one index lets you do it for any K-mer length.
So yet another index for K-mers. Great. Yeah. Nice.
And when I say in preparation, I really do mean we're not done.
So of course, but
this claim might be one I regret making in public, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And about your first question at the end, so the minimizer thing we were discussing, I have a paper at SIA this year that actually will present in just a couple of weeks in Venice, co-authored with many other people, called the U-index.
Yes.
So that you can actually do what you were mentioning before. So you can use minimizers to produce succinct sketches of your input text, and then you can use any universal, any full text index on top of those sketches.
Yeah.
We didn't try the move structure, because I mean, for no good reason, just because there is no public available implementation in Rust, and since Ragnar did all the experiments, so he really wanted to have a move structure in Rust, but we don't have it yet.
Yeah.
So I think the simple answer would be yes. I mean, you can definitely combine the two, but one limitation is that we need the original text to perform the final matching step. So that's probably what you want to avoid. So
yes, absolutely. So like in our Spumoni 2 work, so basically what we would like is for the move structure to imitate our Spumoni 2 result. In that paper, we did minimizer digestion down to width 4 minimizers so that they would fit in 1 byte. We then used the R index on a 256 letter alphabet. And the fact that we had done the minimizer sampling affected accuracy only a tiny, tiny little bit. But it improved speed by a lot, both because we're taking bigger steps because we're moving from minimizer to minimizer. But even without that, we're also iterating 1/4 as many times because even like let's say the concatenated minimizers were the same length as the original string. It's still a huge win because we're going 4 letters at a time, which you can't normally do because you need the local consistency of the minimizers for that to work. So you couldn't do it just by taking every non-overlapping window of length 4, because you would have a phasing problem. You wouldn't necessarily have started in the same place. But because minimizers are locally consistent parsing, basically, you can they're automatically phased up for you, and you can just iterate the loop fewer times.
So just for Julius, with your index, you need this next to verify matches in the end.
Exactly.
With these data sets, maybe you can do RMC concession.
Also. So you mean we can apply LZ to the original text? True. Absolutely. That's true. That makes sense. All right. More questions?
Thank you.
We conclude this session and let's thank the speaker again.
Hello, everyone. I am Yoshitaka from Shizuoka University. So Hamamatsu, I'm coming from Hamamatsu City. It is located in between Nagoya and Tokyo, so near to Fujisan. Okay, so I would like to present an entitled Application and Limitation of Itemset-Frequency Sketches. First, we briefly show the background and the problem of item-set-frequency sketching, abbreviated by IF sketch. Then we should like to consider some extensions of queries used in IF sketch. Along with our extension, we show how IF sketches are available for time series analysis in some case studies. So I am sorry that this content is ongoing, so it is not complete. So I'm happy if you give your precious comments. So background, we often see streaming data, which is defined as an infinite sequence of events. One typical example is sensor data observed in H nodes. Then streaming data is useful for real-time analysis of observations arriving at high speed. For example, detection of trend changes and anomalies. To promote this kind of online processing, the research of summaries have been extensively studied so far. A summary deals with a succinct data structure that can respond specific relational queries. Suppose that streaming data S consisting of E1, E2, En, where EI is
an event of the ordered universe set U arriving at timestamp I. Then we let R is a relation over the ordered universe set. Then we can consider a relational query on the relation R. Then summaries can be categorized by two kinds of queries. One is membership queries that are required to answer if there exists an event such that the relation R holds between some events and query or not. The second queries is support queries that are required to count the number of events that holds the relation R with the query Q. Then algorithms for summaries are designed in approximate setting. Let Q be a query. F is the true value of the query Q, and F hat Q is the estimated value of Q. Then the algorithms must give the estimated value F hat Q such that the probability of that the output error, the gap, is less than a given maximum error is greater than 1 minus delta, where delta is the maximum probability of error occurrence. So far, there are many studies in the algorithms for constructing summaries. And it is well known that the space lower bound of membership summaries is omega n, meaning that it is impossible to construct a sublinear summary for membership queries. On the other hand, there are several support summaries found that can be constructed in a sublinear space. Then we would like to categorize the support summaries into 3 types according to the relation R. One deals with the equivalence relation. It can estimate the frequency of item Q. Second one deals with the linear ordered relation that can estimate the rank of value of Q. The final one deals with partial ordered relation that can estimate the number of events, including Q. Let us give examples. Sorry, this is a bit small, but the first one is for equivalence relation. Given a sequence of items, we want to compute the count for each items. The second one is given a sequence of values, we can compute the count, the number of events greater than a query. So it corresponds to a rank. And the third one is we deal with a sequence of item sets. And then given a query that is item set, and we want to compute the number of events that contain the query. So the equivalence support summary is known as heavy hitters, and linear support summary is known as quantile summary. And these two classes have efficient methods in both probabilistic and deterministic approaches. And they have already been applied in various domains with limited resources and privacy-preserved constraints. On the other hand, the final partial ordered support summary is limited to the applications, except for the association rule mining. And this partial final support summary is known as item set frequency summary. And our scope is to investigate the feasibility of item set frequency sketch. Okay. At the moment, there is a known method in probabilistic approach proposed by 21. Okay, then let me explain what item set frequency sketch. So later we would like to abbreviate item set frequency sketch as IF sketch. This is a succinct representation of binary based database. The problem is that given a query Q represented as a set of attributes, that is item set, then we want to compute the number of records where each attribute in Q is 1. For example, if we consider the query Q as A1 and A3, then from this binary database, there are 2 records that contains attributes of A1 and A3 as 1. So given a query, we want to compute the frequency that contains attributes. So naive linear search requires space complexity of order n. It is obvious. However, it increases according to the record size. Alternatively, there is randomized algorithms proposed by 21. The space complexity is order m powered by 2 divided by epsilon powered by 2. So m is the number of attributes and epsilon is error, maximum error. So it is independent from the size n. So then in my mind, there are several advantages of IF sketch. One is rich representation of queries by using partially ordered relations. So let me give examples. We can deal with logical conjunctions of attributes. If we consider the weather relational database, then we can construct a query, this kind of conjunctions. Then by using IF sketch, we can quickly respond the frequency. Then if the frequency of the current query is very low, it may be something new happening. This can be regarded as anomalies or trend change happens. Okay, so we would like to explain briefly how IF sketch can be constructed in randomized approach. Okay, so this is very simple. There are 2 steps. One is translating the original database into so-called vertical format or indexing format. For each attribute, we maintain only the timestamps when the attribute value become 1. For example, if we focus on attribute A1, then since timestamp 1 and timestamp 3, these values become 1. So we just maintain these timestamps. Then we can construct the set of timestamps for each attribute. Next, we sketch the set of timestamps using a set summary. Let S be the set of timestamps. Then, in worst case, S can contain n values. Instead, by using set summaries, we can only maintain limited values. And there is a well-known set summary called k-minimal values, abbreviated by KMV. It uses a hash function that converts the timestamp into a random value between 0 to 1. Then, after converting, we just maintain the k-minimal values. Okay, so we would like to explain how to estimate the frequency using these data structures. First of all, we focus on this binary database. Then we first construct k-minimal values for each attribute. Then, for example, for the attribute A1, we have 4 timestamps, and each timestamp is converted into hash values according to these hash tables. For example, the timestamp 1 is converted into 0.4 according to this hash table. And also timestamp 3 is converted to 0.3. In this way, every timestamps are converted to real values. And we just keep only k values. And if we set the k as 2, we just maintain these 2 values. So this is IF sketch. Then by using this IF sketch, we can estimate the frequency with a simple way. It is based on the estimation formula proposed by the previous study. So first, k intersection is the number of common values. Then if we set the query Q as A1 and A2, then we have 4 values, and we observe 1 value is common. Okay, so k intersection should be 1. And the upper U is the maximum value over the k minimal values. Then, in this case, since we have 4 values and the maximum value should be 0.4, then according to the formula, we can estimate the frequency is 2.5. And this is pretty similar to the ground truth, although there is an error. So in this way, by using IF sketch, we can estimate the frequency. And this KMV sketch is known as a set summary for counting the distinct elements. There are many works on this summary. The input is streaming elements, and we want to the number of distinct elements. The algorithms have to work only one pass scanning. And also, algorithms have to deal with multi-set operations like intersection and unions. So this is the prior status. Interestingly, the deterministic approaches is negative result. The lower bound is omega n. So there is no way to reduce the space in the deterministic approach. However, the probabilistic approach can reduce the space complexity, and there are several good ways, like KMV or hyperlog technique. So by using set summary, we can construct IF sketch. Then we would like to explain the intuition of KMV estimation. So first of all, the estimation of distinct elements is basically defined as K divided by U, where K is the parameter and U is the case value. So this is one figure. So if we have K, we have F distinct values, then for the estimated interval between neighbors should be 1 divided by F. Then the value of case minimal value, this one, that is U, is estimated as K divided by F. Then by converting these equations, we have this estimation. Next, the estimation of distinct elements of intersections of two sets is defined as given as K intersection divided by upper U. And K intersection is the number of common values in the merged K minimal values of two sets. And upper U is the case value in the merged KMV. Then we want to know the number of distinct elements of intersections A and B. And this number is equal to Jaccard distance times the number of elements of unions. And the unions can be easily estimated by K divided by upper bound according to the original estimation. We just change the case value U to U upper. And also the Jaccard distance is emulated by K intersection divided by K. That is because by using random hash functions, choosing K minimal values is regarded as K times random sampling. So this estimation can be used. Until now, we review how IF sketch works. So here we would like to move to the issue how IF sketch is available. So although this is ongoing works, but I would like to present some ideas. One is extension to range queries. In this case, each attribute takes a value in a finite ordered set, and query Q is represented as a set of ranges, each of which is of the form Li, Ui, where Ui is an upper bound of the attribute AI, and Li is a lower bound of the attribute AI. Then we want to know the number of records where each attribute value is in the range of Q. Let me give an example where only one attribute AI exists, and AI has some value between 1 and 5. And now we suppose these records are given. In this case, we want to deal with range queries. To do so, one easy solution is translating attribute into two kinds of binary tables called lower bound table and upper bound tables. And lower bound table has one values in the left-hand side from the corresponding value. On the other hand, in the upper bound tables, the one values are put in the right-hand side. So by using these two kinds of tables, we can deal with range queries. So suppose that the query Q1 is the range between 2 and 4. Then in these tables, there are 3 records that holds this range. And by checking the attribute A12 and A14 for each tables, then by using IF sketch, these 3 counts can be produced. Okay, so this is one extension. Second is temporal range queries. We often want to answer the frequency among a specific time range. So for example, we want to search some hotspots or trend changing. Then one easy way is embedding time code for each value in KNV sketches. For example, by putting this kind of time code, year, month, day, week, AM, PM, into each values. Then by using time code, if we want to focus on some specific time range, like 25 years or the August events, then by checking the time code, we just focus on the values that satisfy this time range. So on the other hand, there are several limitations of IF sketch. One is that IF sketch may be difficult to handle distance queries. where we want to answer the number of records which have distances more or less than a threshold with respect to the query, because it requires to expand the distance condition, which involves combinatorial explosion of subqueries. Let me give a Hamming distance. For instance, given this binary database, and we consider the query queue, then if we have to answer the number of records whose distances are more than 2, then every record has distance 3 with this query. Then we have to compute all the records. However, to do so, it is necessary, in my mind, by expanding the original queries to this kind of combinatorial subqueries. So then it may be infeasible. Okay, then this is one ongoing application for time series analysis using iHaveSketch. The input is a set of time series data and taking values in a finite ordered set. And we would like to use range queries with maximum measurement error. And we want to compute the frequency of the range query with respect to the set of time series data. So the left-hand side, this is input. Suppose that we have 3 time series data, each of which has some values from a finite ordered set. And a query is also time series data with some measurement error. And measurement error is very important for scientific analysis. So in some specific domains, we can compute the measurement errors. Then by using this range, maximum range, we search the time series data that hold the query time series data with measurement errors. So this is applications. And now we are considering transient detections in light curves. And there is emerging domains in time domain astronomy. And in Japan, there is a Schmidt telescope with CMOS cameras like these ones for traversing all the skies. And the data is very massive. So for each stellar body, we can observe the time series of light strengths. Then we want to find out some transient in real-time manner. Okay, this is one typical examples of the flares. In a very short period, light curve rapidly increase. So by searching the database, we would like to find out this kind of new phenomena. So then, as a preliminary experiments, we conduct to use I have sketch using the data set from the time domain astronomies. There are 100 normal light curves, and each curve contains about 4,000 samples. First of all, we perform data pre-processing. At first, we apply Z normalization for each light curve. Second, we apply equi-width discretization into 256 values. Third, we decompose the light curve to the sliding windows, where window size is 12, slide width 3. Then we have totally 15,000 windows. Then first we construct I have sketch from these windows, where we set the parameter k as 500 and hash functions is 100. Then we consider range query for artificial transient signals, like this ones. The shape, transient shape is triangle, and the length has 4 values, and strength is 1 sigma, where sigma is the standard deviations, and 3 sigmas. And the maximum measurement error is set as to 20%. Then the intuition is that by querying such transient signals, then the frequency should low. But the normal signals may be not so low frequency. First of all, we would like to show performance of I have sketch by changing the parameters or values of k and the number of hash functions. Then here, by increasing the hash values k, then it is obvious in theory, but actually the error bound is decreasing. Also, by increasing the hash numbers, the error range also decreasing. Second, we observe the relation between relative error and execution time, where relative error is defined as the error, absolute error, divided by the two values. And the right top figure is the histograms. So frequency and the number of windows there. And we pick up some typical windows whose frequencies is low and middle high. Then we check the relative error and execution time according to the number of hash numbers. Then we observe that in the low frequency, for the queries with low frequencies, it requires the number of hash functions more than 50. And also relative error is not so low, about 5%. On the other hand, if we focus on queries with middle frequencies, then by setting the number of hash functions as 10, the relative error is about 2%. And the x-axis is execution time, and so by increasing the number of hash functions, linearly increase the execution time. And the queries with high frequencies, the relative error is about 0.5%. Okay, so this is one examples for querying transient signals. We vary the strengths and intervals from 1 sigma to 3 sigma, and 100 intervals and 500 intervals. And blue one is the original light curves, and the below one is the frequency estimated by Itemset-Frequency. Then we may observe that in the transient, the estimated values would be decreasing. Maybe. Okay, then we conducted a comparison experiments with deep ant, that is anomaly detection based on time series forecasting. It is temporal convolutional models. And also we constructed deep ant and wavelet transform for reducing noises in the original light curves. Then by using deep ant and deep wavelet, we can forecast the time series data. Then by checking the gap between the forecasting values and true values, we determine the anomalies. And this is preliminary results. We change the transient types from the strengths 1 sigma, 3 sigma, and the intervals from 60 and 500, these ones. And the left one is the deep ant, and middle one is deep ant and wavelet, and the final one is our Itemset-Frequency anomalies. Then totally deep ant wavelet is high accuracies for some instances. On the other hand, can we think that the performance could be stable on L3 instances here? And also, there is a possibility that Itemset-Frequency can detect a small but long transient, like L1 500. Okay, so my talk is this. This is concluding remarks. We would like to introduce Itemset-Frequency sketches, and we would like to explain a randomized approach using set summaries. And we would like to present ongoing ideas for extending the queries. And also, for the future work, we would like to investigate the feasibility of Itemset-Frequency in time series analysis. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing ongoing work. Is there any question or comments from audience? So I have a quick question on the. So what is the problem of you presented on ongoing work now? It shows enough performance for it has enough performance, or you need some modification.
Yeah, indeed, yes, indeed. Thank you for the questions. Probably I think some implementation issue exists. So probably in the theoretical behaviors, the error bound should be decreasing. And also, however, some convergence is coming. So we want to decrease theirs. And we have to.
For the problem is your implementation.
Yeah, our team's implementations is not
Only
so.
Implementation.
I suspect. And also the performance for the accuracy should be designed by performing the ablation studies. So, but probably some possibilities that I have sketched is good at increasing the accuracy. So by focusing on these specific types, we investigate.
Is there any question or comments?
This is a comment and maybe also a question for Yasuo. So I remember some time ago you used sketches for frequency estimation for data compression. Is that so?
I combined repair and frequency sketches, and repair count the number of diagrams first, and
Right.
and then replace the most appearing frequency pairs, right? So I approximate the count by using this frequency sketch.
So this is the same sketch. Is it applicable to your?
Yeah, I think so. We can improve the results. I use a sketch of the previous results. I forgot the name actually. The name of the sketch, but now this sketch is more high performance. So accurately estimate the number of counts, I think. So yeah, we can improve the results.
Okay. And just to clarify, so the main computational bottleneck in this is hashing? Or
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Just hashing.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you very much.
Question or comments? No? Okay, so let's move on to the next speaker, and let's thank the speaker again.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. I'm really sorry for not being there with you. Okay, so in this talk, I'm going to overview practical solution to the problem of approximate nearest neighbors search over a collection of vectors. Solution to this problem have become increasingly popular in the recent years as vector-based retrieval becomes a core building block in modern search engines. I'm presenting this topic here mainly because of three reasons. First, because it's a problem I'm currently working on, and I like it. The second one is because it's a classical problem that many of you may be familiar with, even if actually there is a big gap between the best theoretical solution you may aware of and what are the currently best solutions in practice. And in this talk, I'm going to review the last ones. And finally, because I think there is, in this very hot topic, there is a lot of space for novel data compression ideas and applications of succinct data structures. So some of you may be interested in investigating these aspects. Okay, so why vector retrieval is so important today? Well, because in the recent year, we have seen a major shift in how we approach search and retrieval. Traditionally, search was keyword-based, so the user provides a bunch of terms, and the search engine has to return those documents that better match the terms provided by the user. But today, the dominant paradigm is changing. Indeed, instead of searching raw data, we now transform an entire collection of objects, whether they are text or documents or images, videos, audios, and so on, into a geometric representation, which is called embeddings. These embeddings are high-dimensional vectors generated by black magic, essentially neural networks, which are trained to capture the semantic content of each item. Here, the intuition is quite simple. If you have two items that are similar in their meaning, you want the corresponding embeddings to be close in the vector space, accordingly to some similarity measure, like cosine similarity or distance. So now retrieval with this approach, retrieval becomes a geometric problem. We are given a query, which is transformed into a vector by using the same neural network. And our goal is to find the top k most similar vectors in the dataset. Of course, this is the classic k-near neighbor search, but given the huge size of the datasets we are dealing with, we are interested only in linear space, super efficient practical solutions. Given these premises, it's not a big surprise that many of the largest tech companies have built their own custom implementation of approximated near neighbors solutions. Some of them are open source, like Fice from Meta, so essentially Facebook, Scan from Google Search, and Noi from Spotify, while others are internal and heavily optimized from production scale workloads. At the same time, we also have seen a wave of startups whose entire business revolves around providing vector search infrastructures for their customers. Examples of these are Pinecone, Wave8, and Quadrant, which are some of those new startups working on vector databases. Okay, now that hopefully I motivated the interest in this problem, let me more carefully introduce it. We start with a dataset of vectors, each vector for each document usually. And those documents have a dimensionality which is a few hundred components. But the recent trend is to increase it, so the dimensionality, up to a few thousand components. And those components contain floating point values. So we have a lot of these vectors, one for each item in our collection. So those are vectors in a certain vector space. And given a query, the query is transformed into a vector itself. And so it's a point in the same vector space, and our goal is to find the k nearest neighbor in this vector space. Okay, usually we are looking for the top k results, and k is in the order of 10, 100, or even thousands. And we are minimizing a certain similarity function, which may be the Euclidean distance, or we want to maximize the dot product or minimize the cosine similarity. Due to the course of dimensionality, actually, we cannot quickly find always the exact results, but actually, we have to omit some approximation. The approximation are in the form of few real top k results, which are not present in the result list we are reporting. Practical solutions that we are going to consider next actually doesn't usually provide any theoretical guarantee on the quality of the result they are returning, but in practice, the recall is usually very high and most of the time bigger than 90%. The recall that I'm referring to is the fraction of true nearest neighbor we are able to return in the K results we are reporting. Okay, so as I said before, I'm going to detail what are the practical solutions for this problem. And there are a lot actually, but we can broadly classify them into 5 different categories. The first one is probably the one you are more familiar with. Locality sensitive hashing belongs to this family. And the idea here is to use an hash function which preserve the similarity among vectors. So essentially we map vectors to a certain position in a table in a table containing our element, and we want to have collisions if 2 vectors are similar according to our similarity function. Then we do the same for the query and we scan the buckets in which we are projecting our query. Okay, these solutions have a lot of good, nice theoretical properties, but actually are not the best in practice. There are other better solutions in practice. One of the strategy, which is quite popular, is the clustering-based methods, in which the main idea is to run a clustering algorithm on our dataset and split the dataset into a certain number of clusters that you can see represented here. For each cluster, we have a centroid which summarizes the content of the vectors in the cluster. And the solutions are able to find the top K results by first identifying what are the most promising clusters by scanning the centroids. Once those clusters have been identified, we do a brute force search on the clusters. Okay, this is a pretty simple idea, but it's worth used in practice because of its very quick construction algorithm. Okay, another class are the tree-based methods, in which the idea is to build a tree on top of our dataset. We start from the root. At the root, somehow we subdivide the dataset in 2 or more regions, and which are represented recursively on the left and right subtrees of our tree. And then we continue like this by splitting our dataset once again and continue like this till we reach some stopping criteria. At query time, we start from the root and somehow, based on the strategies adopted by the particular method, we have to go down from the root to some leaves and hopefully find our top K nearest neighbor. Okay, the second method, the fourth method are actually the one which currently performs better in practice. The idea of these graph-based methods is to build a graph on top of our dataset. The graph contains as a vertex for each data point in our dataset, which are connected. Yeah, okay. So based on some proximity, so we connect essentially nodes which are close in the space. Okay, the last method is actually the family in which methods are designed by combining the previous methods that I just described. Okay, what we are evaluating when we evaluate the efficiency of one of such methods? Well, there are 3 main resources we want to consider. First, the recall of the method. So how large is the fraction of the true nearest neighbor our method is able to find? And as I said before, usually the target recall is above 90%. Then, of course, we want to minimize the time, and the best solutions are able to answer queries in the order of few milliseconds. And finally, the methods usually add some data structure on top of the dataset, and we also, of course, measure how much extra space is used for this extra data structure. Okay, as I anticipated before, graph-based methods are currently the best solutions for dense vectors. So those are the methods I'm going to overview in the next slides. Okay, so the idea of this method is to build a proximity graph. Okay, in this proximity graph, we have a node for each data point. And we fix a parameter which says the maximum degree of our nodes. And we add edges that connect similar nodes. Okay. Actually, this is not completely true because we also want other kind of edges, which are long or medium range edges that allows us to reduce the diameter of the graph. I will be more clear about this later on. Okay, once the graph is somehow built, most of the graph-based algorithms use a greedy strategy to explore the graph. We usually start from an entry point, which most of the time is always the same node, and we start expanding the neighborhood of this entry point in order to find candidates which are closer to the query. And we continue like this, in this greedy manner, until we get close enough to our query point. Okay, I will be more clear about this later on when I'm going to detail this searching strategy a bit more. Okay, there are a lot of strategies proposed in the recent years, including HNSW, which is one that I'm going to describe better later on, but also Vanama, for example, is a recent strategy proposed by Microsoft. Okay, as I said, HNSW is probably the best one currently. And there are a lot of implementations. Just search for it on the net and you will see how popular it is. Okay, let me briefly describe this algorithm. Okay, the starting point of the solution is a previous solution called NACE-W. And the idea of this solution was to build the proximity graph, as I said before. So we have a node for each data point, and every node is connected to the closest vectors in the dataset. Okay, but we also want long-range and medium-range links in order to reduce the diameter of the graph. Okay, these are medium range, these are long ranges. So in this way, we want to guarantee the connectivity of the graph, and also we want to reduce the diameter. The goal is to have logarithmic diameter. This is because, as we are going to see in a second, this guarantees that the query algorithm quickly converges and gets closer to the region containing the query. Okay, let's see how the search works. Well, this is can you see my pointer, right? Okay, this is the query. And this is the starting point, which is one vertex in our graph. Okay, so we only know the neighborhood of this starting point. So we consider its neighborhood and evaluate the distance between our query and the whole neighborhood of the starting node. Okay, in this way, we identify the closest candidate and we move to that candidate. Okay, the real algorithm is a little bit more complicated. We are keeping a heap with candidates, and every time we select the current best candidate. But I mean, this is enough for this presentation. So from our starting point, we move to this next green vertex, and we do exactly the same. Okay? We explore the neighborhood, and we move to the best candidate we have seen so far. Okay, at a certain point, in this case, exactly now, we reach a point in which the neighbors of the current candidate are not closer to the query than the candidate. So we met a stopping criteria and we stop the search in this point. Okay, so there are a lot of different possible strategy to stop. This is the one of them. Okay, in this case, we conclude that this green node is the top one nearest neighbor to our query. In this case, that's exactly the case, but it may happen that we end up in a local minimum and we fail in finding the true nearest neighbors. Okay, that was the starting point for AHNSW, which introduces a hierarchy on top of the previous algorithm. This idea was inspired by Pag's skip list, which probably you are aware of. This solution is a probabilistic alternative to binary search trees, which can be used to answer predecessor queries. Okay, I'm going a bit in details of this solution because if you don't know it, it's worth because it's very, very elegant. Okay, the idea, so the starting point is probably the worst possible solution for answering predecessor queries, a sorted list of elements. Since we are dealing with a list, we cannot, since we are dealing with a list, we cannot do random access. So the only thing we can do is to scan the list from left to right, searching for the predecessor of our. Pag's idea was to add other layers on top of this. The layer number one is a sample of the elements in the previous layer, and the elements are selected with an exponential decrease in probability. Okay, we continue this way, adding more layers. Now the search for the predecessor, notice that the predecessor is the nearest neighbor search on 1D, so quite related to our problem. So searching for the predecessor of our query, let's say 12, we start at the last layer and we scan the list from left to right at that layer. But since we are selecting with exponential decreasing probability, we have just few elements there, and probably they are sampled almost uniformly over the original list. So they are spread enough in our list, in our sorted list. Okay, once we finish the layer number one, so we cannot proceed to the right, we go down by one layer and we continue like this. Of course, the best, so the predecessor for our query, still 5. Continue in the next level, which we advance to 11, but we cannot advance more. So we go on down to the next level till we stop because we are layer number 0 and we were successfully able to find our predecessor 11. Okay, due to the selection strategy and this searching algorithm, Pags was able to prove that it takes logarithmic time, like BST. So they are a valid alternative to it. Okay, the idea of HNSW is more or less similar. So it was inspired by this idea. The sampling strategy is very similar. Indeed, we create a set of layers, and for each layer, we sample vertices from the previous level, with an exponential decreasing probability. So this was our original graph. We sample vertices here, and then we get this one, and we sample again and go on. The only thing that it's worth to say is that each graph So the edges are selected for that particular subsample. So we are selecting a subsample of vertices, but not a subsample of the edges of the previous. Okay, now the search starts from an entry point at the last layer. But since we have a subsample, we can imagine that here every edge moves our query very close, allows us our query to do a great jump in the region which is closer to what we are actually searching for. Okay, so we move with a few steps, we get very close at the first level. Once we reach a local minimum, we can move in the previous level and continue like this till we reach the layer number 0, in which we are actually finding our results set. Okay, so this is more or less a brief sketch of what is now the most popular solution for this problem. Okay, let me just mention the construction algorithm, which is because it is a problem in the solution that may be addressed as a future work. Okay, our goal is to construct a graph. And we have two parameters, m, which is the maximum number of neighbors per node in our graph. Plus we have another parameter that tune building time versus graph quality. Okay, the construction algorithm is a problem because it's very slow. And it's very slow because it's incremental. So essentially, we are inserting one vertex after the other. And in inserting a new vertex, we have to find the m closest point in each layer. So essentially, we are solving the top m near neighbor search for the vertex, for every vertex we want to insert. And for doing this, we are using the graph we were able to build so far. Of course, since we are building in this way, the algorithm is very, very, very slow because we are using a search for every new node we would like to insert. Okay, this plot here just shows that for reasonably large data set, we are using the construction time is already in the order of hours. Another problem is that we are storing the structure of the graph, and this may use a lot of space. Okay, apart from this problem, the solution is very popular because it's very, very efficient. Here I'm showing you these plots on different data sets whose size is in 1 billion vectors, so quite large data set. And I'm showing these plots just to show you that in a few milliseconds, we can reach a recall which is higher than 90%. So they are very, very effective. Even if, however, they are not able to provide any theoretical guarantee about the quality of the results. Okay, hope my presentation was understandable. Let me briefly, before moving on, let me briefly present what are the open problems of these approaches. As I mentioned before, the high construction time is a problem. And so a very interesting open problem would be to be able to build graphs by processing more nodes at once instead of inserting each of them one after the other. The other problem is that even if the final average recall is quite high, there are a lot of cases, roughly 5% of the queries, which have a very low recall. And this is because of the search gets stuck in a local minimum. So we stop early our search because we are not able to move on better candidates. So for solving this problem, it's really needed to improve the quality of the graph, so being able to build better graphs. And it's not even clear what does it means, better graphs. Or improve the searching algorithms, which may be able to escape from these local minimums quite efficiently. Finally, probably an open problem that interests you more. Apart from storing the vectors, which take a lot of space, we are storing extra space because of the structure of the graph. Most of the current implementations do not use compression at all. But actually, a recent paper from Meta shows that we can use Elias-Fan or wavelet trees for compressing the graph. This is still an embryonic result, but may be interesting for some of you to explore these aspects and try to better exploit redundancies present in these graphs to improve their space usage. Okay, so this was the first subtopic I would like to discuss on the overall topic of k-nearest neighbor search. The next one is the compression of the dataset. So, as I said before, we would like to compress the graph, but actually the main space usage is due to the large dataset of big vectors we are storing. And to compress the dataset, something has been already done. And in particular, I'm going to present one of the first, but still very, very important solution, which is called product quantization. The product quantization is a lossy data compression algorithm. And using lossy data compression is very reasonable, since those vectors are coming from black magic, essentially. We don't know how important are each value in our vector. So we can somehow hope to reduce the space by losing some information on those vectors. Okay, so product quantization. Okay. As anticipated, is a lossy compression strategy. It is able to reduce the space used by the dataset. Of course, we are reducing the space, so we are happy. But the main reason for reducing the dimensionality, so the size of our vectors, is because we can compute the distances faster. And we also can improve memory access while we are loading those vectors before computing this. Of course, it's a lossy algorithm, so we are losing something. And most of the time, we are losing recall. So we get fewer true positive results in our final result. Okay, let me present the idea, because the basic idea is quite simple. Okay, we have this original vector. The dimensionality in this example is only 12. The idea of product quantization is to split the vector in 3 blocks, each of size 4. Here we are. And then replace each block with 1 byte code word, which allows us to access a representation of the block into a table. Okay, that's all. Congratulations, you saved a lot of bits. Let's see how this assignment is done. Okay, so this is our original vector. By splitting it, we are actually obtaining sub-vectors into a subspace. And for each of these subspace, we run a clustering algorithm like k-means with a certain number of centroids. For example, 256, if we want to represent each block with a code word of 8 bits. Okay? So, and then we represent a table with these centroids. Okay? So essentially, we are splitting the space into subspaces, mapping each of our original piece into one of these subspaces and representing it with the corresponding centroid. Okay, we do this for all the subspaces. Okay, of course, the compression is for each piece, find the closest centroid, and replace it with the identifier of the centroid. Pretty easy. Okay, we do this for all the subspaces until we reach our compressed version of our original vector. Okay. Now, of course, you can come back easily to a lossy representation of the original vector just by going backward, accessing the table, and you get the representation corresponding to the value. Okay. Of course, this can be done, but actually, the main operation we are interested in is distance computation. And we are computing a lot of distances between a query and several different dataset vectors in our dataset. So it's reasonable to do some pre-computation in order to speed up the distance computation without explicitly decompressing each vector. And this can be done by going over our centroids and compute the distances between them and the query. So we get these distances, one for each centroid, one table for each subspace. Okay? So the distance between our vector and the query is computed just by looking up the distances in this table accordingly to the IDs we have in our compressed representation. Okay? Pretty easy, but very effective, and indeed is implemented in any implementation of k-nearest neighbor search systems. Okay, here is a result coming from a blog post of Wave8. Wave8 is one of the startups I told you at the beginning. Okay, as you can see here, there are different level of compression, and these are the records you can achieve. Essentially, it's lossy, so we are losing a lot of recall most of the time, but we are saving a lot of space. Okay? It's a trade-off. Of course, this is a simple idea, and there has been evolution in the last couple of years. And this is a very, very important problem because the datasets are big, the dimensionality are becoming bigger and bigger. So it's really, really important to compress those vectors effectively. So if you are interested in this topic, these are a couple of pointers you can follow to learn more. And for sure, that's an hot topic worth to investigate. Okay, I think I have 14 minutes, so I can start presenting the last subtopic of my presentation, which is the same problem on sparse representations. Let me say something more about this. Okay, especially for texts, there are different family of embeddings. Dense vectors, which are the one I described so far, in which every document is replaced with a single dense vector. Then it is possible to represent each document with several different dense vectors, but it's also possible to represent a document with sparse vectors. What's the difference? Well, the difference here is that we are increasing the dimensionality a lot. So we move from 100 of components to 10 of thousands of components or more, but only a small fraction of them is non-zero. Okay? In this sense, those are sparse vectors. We can let the dimensionality grow a lot, but we are sparsifying the vectors a lot. Okay? Those sparse vectors are very important for text as well, for several reasons. First, they are more effective than dense vectors. Plus, they are more space efficient because only a small portion of the components has a value. plus they can be interpreted because each dimension here corresponds to a term. So for example, you can see this here a query, and this is the corresponding representation in which, sorry again, I don't know what's going on, in which every component corresponds to a term of the original query, which for each or similar words, synonymous and so on. And for each of these terms, we have a value which is telling us what's the importance of that term for the original query. Okay? So you can interpret what's going on in this process. Somehow interpret. Okay? So with these parts vectors, the problem is the same. We just have a higher dimensionality, but for each vector, since it's sparse, we want to represent them in a sparse way. So for each vector, we represent what is the identifier of the component and the corresponding value. So we are just representing the non-zero entries in this vector. Okay, just to give you a couple of numbers, real numbers. A standard data set in the community contains roughly 9 million vectors. The number of component is in the order of 30,000 components, but only 100 of them are non-zero in each vector. Okay? So finding efficient solutions for this problem received a lot of attention recently because the model is more effective than using dense vectors. And indeed, there was a competition in NeoRIPS 2 years ago, sponsored by important companies like Microsoft and Amazon and Pinecone, in which the task was exactly this, okay? Be able to reach a high level of recall quickly on sparse data sets. And the graph-based solutions were able to outperform inverted indexes-based solutions by a large margin. Okay? Why? Okay, what I want to do now is to show you that actually inverted indexes can be improved a lot. And the one were used in the competition actually were quite unoptimized solutions of inverted indexes. Why we are interested in inverted indexes-based solutions for this problem? Well, because inverted indexes are quite fast to build, so you can build the index quite efficiently, and are easy to be interpreted because, I mean, there is no construction algorithm which may be strange enough, like in graph solutions. Okay, so what we are going to do in the next couple of slides is I'm going to show you what are the inefficiencies of inverted indexes and try to solve them one after the other. And in doing this, I'm going to record our progresses by measuring the number of dot product computations we are performing. Why we are measuring the number of dot product computations? Well, because that's the dominant cost in any real search algorithm. Okay, so let's start by measuring how many dot product computation we would have to pay if we were using a brute force algorithm, which just scan the whole data set vector by vector. Okay, and that's the number, okay, because that's the size of our data set. Okay, so we scan with brute force, we scan from the beginning to the end, and we compute all the dot products, and we keep a heap which contains the best results, the best top K results we have seen so far. Okay, of course, we can use an inverted index, which is just a transposed matrix of this one, in which for every possible component, we have all the documents which have that component with a non-zero value. Okay, here we are. And then, given a query, we know what are the components of the query. So we have a pointer in each posting list, and we want to scan those posting lists from left to right, looking for all the documents that may have a dot product bigger than 0. And we explicitly compute the dot product for those documents. Okay, here we are. Unfortunately, since the query contains hundreds of non-zero components, we have a lot of lists to scan. And indeed, if we scan those lists, we are actually essentially covering the whole dataset. And so we are not saving too much with respect to the brute force. Okay? So that's a starting point, and we would like to improve over this. The first idea is to consider some pruning strategy. And the pruning strategy is motivated by this property of the dataset, which we call the concentration of importance. Essentially, this property says that a large fraction of the dot product of the vectors in our dataset with respect to the query is due to few top components of the vector itself. So essentially, if we restrict to few top components of our vectors, we are preserving a large fraction of the dot product. Okay, this suggests that we can use pruning. For example, instead of having those big lists, we can prune them to a certain threshold lambda that could be in the order of few thousands postings. Okay, but we can also do the same for the query, because those lines shows that if we restrict to the top component for the query, we are still preserving a large fraction of the dot product. Okay, if we restrict to the top component for the query, essentially we are killing some of these arrows. So we have to scan fewer lists. For example, we can fix a parameter sigma and consider only the top sigma components of the query. Okay. Of course, this is improving, okay, because we are pruning here and we are pruning there, and we are scanning fewer documents. But what about the recall? Actually, this plot tells us that if we fix 4,000 posting per list and 10 top components for the query, we are achieving essentially full recall. We are losing almost nothing. So this is very promising. And that's the idea we are using in this solution, which allows us to reduce the number of these inner product computation from this many to 40,000, which is still not enough to beat graph-based solutions. But there is something more that we could exploit. Indeed, while we are scanning the lists, we are keeping a heap with the top K results we have seen so far. And we also know a threshold tau, which is the minimum inner product that a document must have in order to be able to enter the heap. Okay? So we can exploit this by skipping inner product computation for irrelevant documents. So those documents for which we somehow are sure that their dot product cannot beat the current threshold tau. Okay, and this can be done by using blocking, so we can skip many documents at once and group together documents in posting list which are similar to each other. But we need the way to be able to estimate the inner product. And for this reason, for each block, we store a summary. And the summary estimates the dot product between the best document in the block and the query we are considering. one way to build the summaries is this one, which is conservative. So let's say we have 3 documents in the block. The summary is built by considering the maximum value for each component, and that's the summary. This is conservative in the sense that if you compute the dot product between the query and the summary, you get an upper bound for the true dot product of any document in the block. Okay? Unfortunately, this is not efficient enough because there are too many non-zero components in the summary. That's why we have to keep only few largest non-zero components in the summary we built. So the summary we get, which takes only the largest component in the summary, is precise enough, even if it is no longer conservative. And the good news is that in this way, we are using reasonable space for storing the summary. So the solution here consists in grouping the posting list into blocks, having similar document in the block. For each block, storing the summary, which is able to estimate the dot product of any document in the block with respect to the query. And finally, do this for all the posting in the posting. At query time, we just compute the dot product in between the query and the summary and skip a block, and all the documents in the block, if the estimation is bigger than the threshold tau of the heap we have. Okay, doing this, we are able to reduce a lot the number of dot product computation. Okay, here a couple of results. I'm concluding. Okay, we compare Seismic, it's the approach I just showed you before, with graph-based solutions for sparse vector representations on a standard dataset with SPLADE, which is a way to construct the embeddings. Here you can see the accuracy, so the recall we have that may range in between 90% up to 97%. And the final result is actually that this solution is able to improve the previous solution based on graphs by a factor that ranges in between 2 and 4, roughly. Okay, so I'm running out of time, so I'm concluding now. Let me just say that there are a lot of open problems here, mostly related to space usage that should be reduced and potentially could be done because most of the space is used by the summaries, and maybe it is possible to exploit redundancies within summaries in order to reduce the space used by them. Finally, there is no lossy compression algorithm for sparse vector, differently from dense ones. And the reason is that the sparsity of the vectors. Here we have a lot of components, but just few of them are not zero. So, for example, the product quantization strategy to split into blocks and code each block doesn't work here, because if we are doing this, probably we have blocks that contains only few non-zero components. So we are not gaining anything by this. Okay, so if you are interested in any of this problem, feel free to contact me. I can give you more pointers to recent papers. Thank you for your attention. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to ask, how do you choose the top lambda components to include? So, because you said it, those are the most important representative, but how do you find them?
By component. Okay, so we are sorting by component value. So in each posting list, here we select the top components. So we sort them by value, and we take the the
Value is like the importance of
estimated by
I
the
don't know,
model.
of the component with respect to something. So
Exactly.
you just keep like the lambda highest values. You mean?
We are preserving the lambda highest value. Yeah, exactly. For each posting list. And this is motivated by, sorry, I'm jumping here and there. This is motivated by this property here, which says that the top coordinates, so the one with the largest values, are contributing by a large fraction on the inner product. So these
Yeah,
are in
that makes sense. Yes. So
we
they
estimate
contribute
the top.
more to the final products.
Exactly,
Product, yeah.
exactly.
Can I ask a quick question? And from experimental results in the
Yeah.
last part of your talk, and your method is your similarity search methods are extremely faster than existing methods.
Yeah.
So it's twice as fast at least. And
Yeah.
And my question is, which part is most important to make your method faster?
The cost is dominated by the inner product computation, which includes also the time needed by loading the vector from memory. So accessing the vector plus inner product computation takes most of the time. So essentially, to improve the results, you need to reduce the number of inner product computations you are doing.
Is there any question or comments from Zoom? Yeah, we will finish this talk and let's thank the speaker again.
Thanks a lot.